Welcome and good evening to the City of Shakopee City Council meeting for this last day of spring, June 20th, 2017. If we could call the roll and make a note on Councilmember Lehman being here by Skype.
Yes, Mr. Mayor. Councilmember Luce.
Here.
Councilmember Lehman.
Here.
Mayor Mars.
Here.
Councilmember Whiting.
Here.
Councilmember Mokel.
Here.
Here.
By Skype? I don't know.
All right. Thank you very much. Let's all stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you very much. Moving ahead then to item number 3, a special presentation, and Jamie Pauley will present.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, members of the council. The Minnesota Park and Recreation and Parks Association each year has Award of Excellence that they give out for a variety of different categories. So this year I submitted an application for our Fun for All playground based on the volunteer effort that we had for that playground. We had a task force of 31 volunteers that helped to raise over $195,000 for the project. That came in total a little over $400,000 when all said and done. We couldn't have done it without this volunteer task force, and they were able to secure close to 100 donations in either monetary or in-kind donations. So tonight we have a member of MRPA to present to the City Council this Award of Excellence. So if Mayor, you'd come and accept the award. I'll turn over to Ms. Walsh.
Did you want to say a few words?
I would. Good evening, Mayor and Council. Thanks for having me here today. My name is Cindy Walsh, and I am representing the Minnesota Recreation and Parks Association. I'm on the awards committee, and congratulations to the City of Shakopee and to Jamie. She, just so you know, wrote an outstanding background about the project and was awarded the Award of Excellence for the Fun for All Inclusive Playground. So I'd like to present this award to the City of Shakopee and Mayor Mars. You should be very proud of your park system. I actually live in Chaska, so my kids have been at many of your parks, and you have an outstanding park system and an outstanding director in Jamie. So I'm looking forward to using a lot more facilities here in the future.
Well, thank you very much for the kind words and the award. Thank you. Let's stand for the presentation. Yeah, let's all go. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
This is a great award for the organization. Thank you very much. Special call out to Councilmember Luce, who did a lot of the calling, fundraising, and effort on that, and with the committee and everything. So great honor. Thank you.
Outstanding. It's a great grassroots effort. Congratulations.
Any other comments on the award? Mike?
Just thankful that we got it. I think it's a great thing for the city.
You bet.
I'd like to put a special thanks out to Angela Tucker, member of the school board, who started talking about this many years before it got started, and I think a lot of the initial organizations started over at Arnie's Pub over here, so that's where the best organizations get together in Shakopee, and thank the whole group that put a lot of effort into doing that. So.
Yes, I want to thank Jamie for writing an excellent letter of recommendation. I was reading through that. It was very rewarding to hear about all the effort that went into this, so thank you for that.
This playground is, in the all-inclusive aspect, really sets our community apart from others that they're coming from all over the metro area to come to this playground, and I think it's a great event, a lot to be proud of by our entire community. So get out there and enjoy it. Councilmember Luce?
Yeah, just, they're not only coming from the surrounding communities, they've come as far away as St. Peter. We've had documentation from one of our police officers that they've come from that far. So that's 45, 50 miles. That's a good hike to come to a playground.
Councilmember Lehman?
Great project. Thanks for the award. Great project.
Thank you. Moving ahead then, approval of the agenda. Are there any changes, additions, deletions? Mr. Reynolds?
No, sir, there are not.
Yeah. Councilmember Whiting?
I'll make a motion to approve the agenda as presented.
I have a motion, a second by Councilor Mokel. Discussion? 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 All in favor, say aye. Aye. Those
Aye.
opposed? Motion passes. Thank you. Moving ahead to item number 5, consent agenda. Is there any additions, deletions? Mr. Reynolds?
Nothing from staff, sir.
Councilor Luce?
I just have a question on a couple of them when we get to that point, so.
Do you want to
so-
pull them?
No, I don't want to pull them. I just have a question. Nothing major.
Okay, let's do the adds or subtracts first.
Make a motion to approve the consent agenda.
I have a motion, a second. Councilor Lehman?
I have nothing to add or subtract.
Okay, and then we have a motion on the table for the consent, the second, and Councilor Luce has a couple questions.
Yeah, the XL lease, it's not so much with the lease for XL, but it's the signage that's out there. It doesn't seem quite proper. I don't know that we gave the Water Ski Association private rights to any part of that out there. According to one sign, it's saying that it's private property. Now, to me, that's parkland, that's open to everybody.
Okay.
I would agree, Councilor Luce, and if that signage is out there, I think it should be taken care of.
Okay, it will be taken care of. Ms. Polly?
Yes, Mr. Mayor, members of the council, there is one sign that's been there for years that I actually did talk with Todd Schumacher yesterday, who does our signs. He's going to remove that particular sign. And then we did put some new signs that I had some concerns with, that we were trying to address the private use of the water, and the signs don't come across that way. So we are changing those signs out to just basically say no swimming and no boating unless authorized. And he's working on those signs as we speak.
Thank you. Councilmember Luce?
There is one sign to the north of the pedestrian bridge that's close to the drainage ditch that doesn't seem quite like the wording is proper, so you may want to check that one. It's kind of hidden, so maybe you missed it.
Okay, I can.
All right. Thank you. Others, questions?
No, that's it.
Okay, discussion, otherwise, we will have the consent agenda read before we vote. Mr. Reynolds?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor and members of council. These are consent agenda items for June 20th of 2017. 5A1 adopts resolution number 7896, which sets the public hearing date to consider the vacation of a public right-of-way and public drainage and utilities easement. 5B1 approves a traffic control change on Garden Lane as outlined. 5B2 approves suspension of City Code 130.45 Subdivision C to allow D.R. Horton and their contractors to perform extended construction hours through the end of October. 5C1 approves a lease agreement with XL Energy for the use of 30 acres of land south of Quarry Lake Park for soft surface trails. 5D1 approves the minutes of the June 6, 2017 council meeting. 5D2 approves reclassification of one IT assistant to the position of IT specialist. 5D3 approves a temporary license for St. Joachim and Anne's annual Julie Fest event being held July 28th through 30th of 2017. 5D4 approves suspension of City Code 114.11 to allow Badger Hill Brewery to hold their 5th birthday party event on 23rd of 2017. And 5D5 adopts resolution number 7906, which adopts the State of Minnesota Performance Measurement Program.
Thank you very much, and let's make a special note that thank you very much for the stars on the agenda. I know that's much appreciated. And also on Councilor Whiting.
I think it was birthday.
Birthday. Okay. Yes, birthday.
All right, thank you.
Thank you very much. The consent agenda has a motion and a second. The consent agenda has been read. No further discussion. All in favor, say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Motion passes. Thank you very much. Moving ahead to public hearings. 8A, vacation of public drainage easement. And Mr. Noble, Mr. Reynolds?
Mr. Mayor, recognition of involved citizens.
I apologize, moving a little too fast here. So I apologize. Item number 6. Now I'd like to recognize any citizen that would like to come forward and speak on an item not on the agenda. On an item not on the agenda, please step forward, state your name and address for the record, and welcome. Seeing none, thank you very much. Now we will move to 8A, a vacation of public drainage and utility easement. Mr. Noble, welcome.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, members of the council, members of the audience. As you stated, this is
Oh.
Sorry, Mr. Noble.
Off my game a little bit. Counselor Whiting.
Make a motion to open a public hearing.
Thank you. A second by Counselor Mokel. Any discussion? Discussion? All in favor, say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Public hearing is now open. Mr. Noble will present.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, members of the council, members of the audience. As you stated, this is a public hearing for an application from Shakopee Public Utilities for a vacation of a public drainage and utility easement. Property in question is located out on Kelly Circle. Address is 2168, 2188. You can see on the slide on the screen, there presently are 2 lots that are owned by Shakopee Public Utilities. And on those 2 lots, there are perimeter easements. And what Shakopee Public Utilities would like to do is vacate the easement that's highlighted that runs between the 2 parcels. Should this be a successful application, they will then ask for approval of a minor subdivision to combine these 2 parcels into 1 parcel. That's an administrative process that staff would review and approve. And should this vacation of easement be approved, the proposed easement is described in this slide. Again, you can see that it's an easement that runs between these 2 parcels. The city and other utilities have no need for this utility. Therefore, there's support for the vacation, and we have prepared a resolution that speaks of that approval of vacation. So, are there any questions for staff on this?
Questions of staff? I do. Mr. Noble, the applicant is the Shakopee Public Utilities, is that correct?
That is correct. Yep.
Questions of staff? Counselor Luce?
Well, it just seems to me that we're kind
I have,
of late to the party here. They already constructed the tanks. This should have been done before the construction was done.
Counselor Lehman, did you have a question of staff?
no, I have no questions on the easement on Jennifer Lane.
All right,
No questions.
thank you.
It's,
Kelly Circle.
Kelly Circle.
Kelly Circle, not
Mr.
Jennifer
Lehman, it's
Lane.
Kelly Circle, just
Kelly Circle.
the easement on Kelly Circle, the first public hearing. 8A.
11A1, correct?
It's 8A, public hearing.
8A.
Oh, my bad. I'm sorry. I don't have any questions on that one either. 2 spot properties out on 16 and 18. Nope, no questions.
Thank you. If there's no other questions of staff, would the applicant or the representative like to make comment on this? Please state your name and address for the record, and welcome.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Joe Adams, Shakopee Public Utilities, Planning and Engineering Director. This was an oversight when we got the conditional use permit to build the 2 water storage facilities. was most likely identified as a condition, and we're cleaning that up now as we proceed to build the booster station on this site that is going to take our residents off of the Savage system in the Whispering Oaks neighborhood and put them on the water supply from Shakopee.
Okay. Questions of the applicant? Counselor Lewis?
Yeah, I meant nothing by the, the easement being a
No,
little
it's-
late, but
It's
but
obvious
it's
with
getting cleaned
the
up,
big
that's
tank
all.
right down the middle there. It's pretty obvious we missed it.
Kind of difficult when there's a tank sitting on top of it.
All right, if there's no other questions, thank you, Mr. Adams. This is a public hearing. Would anybody else like to make comment in regard to this application? Please come forward, state your name and address for the record, and welcome. Seeing none, Counselor Lewis?
Make a motion to close the public hearing.
I have a motion to close the public hearing. And Counselor Whiting?
Second.
Second. Further discussion? Discussion? All in favor, say aye. Aye. Those opposed?
Aye.
Motion passes. Thank you very much. I'll work on that delay. Counselor Whiting?
Offer to adopt resolution number 7898, a resolution approving a vacation of a public drainage and utility easement at 2168 and 2188 Kelly Circle.
Counselor Lewis seconds. Motion, further discussion? Discussion? All in favor, say aye. Aye. Those opposed?
He's frozen.
Counselor Lehman?
Aye. I'm in favor.
Max Headroom voice.
Okay, we got that?
I'm good with it.
All right, moving forward then to 8B, Shakopee Avenue Electric Underground Project. This is a public hearing. Counsel Mokel?
I make a motion to open a public hearing.
Second.
I have a motion and a second by Counselor Lewis to open a public hearing. Further discussion? All in favor, say aye. Aye. Those opposed? Motion carries. The public hearing is now open, and Mr. Halverson will present. Welcome.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, council members. This is a public hearing for the Shakopee Avenue, Shakopee Avenue Electric Undergrounding Project. Just a couple comments, and then I'm going to bring Christian Fenstermacher with Shakopee Public Utilities up here to explain the project to you. This project started on kind of the tail end of this 2017 street reconstruction project. They identified the need to replace an existing overhead electric line that runs adjacent but north of the project area. Just to clarify things, this is completely independent of the 2017 street reconstruction project. All costs associated with this, potential assessments, if you order the project, and any potential and successful assessment appeals are all separate from the 2017 street reconstruction project. With that, I'd like to welcome Christian Fenstermacher with Shakopee Public Utilities for more information.
Thank you. Welcome.
Thank you, Mr. Mars and members of the council. Back in the 1970s, this overhead line was constructed, and it was very common for Shakopee Public Utilities at that time to build overhead lines in the backyards. And since then, it's been quite difficult in certain areas for our utility vehicles to access overhead utility lines because of fences and trees and buildings and whatnot. And at this time, when it was built in the 1970s, there was also a railroad right-of-way that was in place that gave our utility vehicles quite easy access to maintain this line. Since then, we've lost that ability to access the line due to overgrowth and just overall use of the area by the residents. Fences, sheds, and trees have grown overgrown and whatnot. So this area has been much harder to access for our trucks. In fact, impossible for our trucks to access due to the area. additionally, it is nearing the end of its life. Within 15 years, where we will need to replace that line altogether, rebuild it altogether. So it has been proposed by Shakopee Public Utilities to underground this line as part of the, not part of the recon project, but adjacent to it, so that any restoration is done in conjunction with the recon project and little disturbance is done otherwise. So we propose to actually install this underground in the front yards instead of the backyards, which has been something we've done in the past, but not recently. All new construction now has been in front yards, which gives easy access from the street right away for our trucks, for our crews to access transformers, pedestals, and whatnot. So it'll be all up to new standards for Shakopee Public Utilities. Additionally, there is a need for underground services to be extended for each resident from that front right away to the back corner of each lot, and Shakopee Public Utilities will be doing that for each resident up to the home and splicing onto their existing underground or up to the house and allowing the customer to convert their service from overhead and underground. Some benefits of this underground project for Shakopee Public Utilities is it will again provide better access for our maintenance activities. It will reduce tree maintenance costs because we'll be underground now and we'll no longer need to access that line and maintain those trees that could fall on the overhead line. It's replacing the aging facilities, and it overall will provide a reduction of outage frequency to these customers on Shakopee Avenue as well as the greater neighborhood in that area. Some benefits to the Shakopee Avenue residents themselves: improve aesthetics. It's very, very common to hear residents or customers or the general public to wish for overhead lines to be undergrounded just because it's out of sight, out of mind. Less of a burden at that point. Removal of obstructions to their backyards. So a lot of these properties have the overhead line crossing through the middle of their property, and when we remove this overhead line, they will now gain access to the full depth of their property, and no longer will have an overhead line that could obstruct any desire to place a fence or a tree or a shed right underneath the line, or even a play structure. And additionally, just as it is a benefit to Shakopee Public Utilities, this will reduce frequency of outages to those residents. So this is kind of illustrates the change and how it will look out there. All of these lines are underground, except for the far western edge of this, which is where it will remain overhead. As you can see, all of the pedestals and transformers will now be located in the front lot corner of these properties. In the past, Shakopee Public Utilities has done this undergrounding in a couple locations. Majority of the time, a city or resident, customer driven has pushed these projects. Therefore, we have always asked those customers to pay $606, or actually the underground charge at that time. So this year it's $606. In the past it could have been $500, depends on what year it was. This is actually an established underground charge for developers for regular undergrounding new residential projects. We charge the developer per lot this underground charge. So some past underground projects that we have done this, where we've asked each resident to pay that underground charge, is Hilldale Drive, which was a City of Shakopee driven project that those residents were in favor of. To underground, I believe it was, I think like 10 lots or a dozen lots. And then also Beach Street in Prior Lake, which is not in the City of Shakopee, but this was a resident-driven project, and each of those residents did pay the underground charge for that project as well. Now, as part of this project is proposed to, and why it's coming to your attention right now is to propose assessing each of the residents the $606 fee. You may ask why assess them this? Could they just pay this? It has been offered as an alternative for them to pay this off over time via assessments instead of paying upfront to Shakopee Public Utilities. The other issue is not everyone has been for this. Granted, we have gotten signatures from 22 of the 31 affected residents. We have also received verbal or written support from 3 additional, but they were unable to sign the petition at that time. The other 6, only 2 have been against it. The other 4, we just have not heard much of anything from. So we have had overall support for this project, but unfortunately there is a couple that have stepped away from supporting this project.
Councilor Lewis, you have a question?
On the back signage page, it says your line currently supplies current for 39 properties. Are there 8 properties that you're not going to be able to underground, or where did that number come from?
I'm sorry, where was that at?
Just above where everybody signed the paragraph, just above it says there.
Oh, on the petition. There was, we originally proposed this for the entire length of Shakopee Avenue from Marshall Road down to 11th. But unfortunately, those 8 on the far west end of the project were very unsupportive of the project. Therefore, we were able to figure out a way we could eliminate those and only concentrate on the area where we really have a problem on.
I just wanted to know.
Behind those 8, it's still accessible, and we still are able to maintain the line very well.
Okay, continue.
I also wanted to point out, as Ryan Halverson has pointed out, that all associated fees from homeowners that are successful from appealing the assessment, Shakopee Public Utilities will be responsible for those, not the City of Shakopee. This kind of illustrates the total cost. It is estimated around $107,000 for this project. We are, as the utility, picking up majority of the costs, which is pretty significant. This will, like I said, help the overall neighborhood, we believe. So we are only asking those residents to pay that underground charge of $606, which comes out to $18,786. That concludes it. Any questions?
Questions of the applicant? Councilor Whiting?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Currently, where the overhead lines are in the back of the property, does the Shakopee Public Utilities have an easement to get into those lines? Utility easement?
We do believe there's an easement back there. Originally, this was a perimeter area. It also was right-of-way for the railroad right-of-way, which we were able to install at that point. So we do believe we have easements across all these.
Couple more questions, if I may. Now, if this doesn't pass through and that easement is needed to be accessed to work on those lines, you're gonna go in and cut the trees and move some of the obstacles? Are you gonna need to do that?
That is correct. In order to maintain that overhead line, we need to have access to this area. So we would plan, if this does not go forward, we would plan no matter what to offload that line through an underground project on Shakopee Avenue, but it would not involve the residents. So that overhead line would remain in place just for those residents.
One more, sorry. Now, as I understand, as a former liaison to the public utilities, that SPUC was going to, it was just the $606 charge. All the wire to connect the houses was going to be supplied. Is that correct?
That is correct. We will be providing the wire up to the house or up to wherever we splice into their existing underground. And we will do that as part of the project. We'll actually install it for them. But on the house itself, if they have an overhead service right now and need to convert, we will not touch the house. That gets into National Electric Code issues, and the customer themselves, the resident themselves, needs to hire an electrician in order to do that work themselves and hire.
You'll bring it up to the house and they'll have to make the connection.
Correct.
Thank you. Counselor Lewis?
Being that you're going in and cleaning up the area, you're gonna take care of all the buckthorn that's back there? I've had complaints about buckthorn there, and being that you're right away, I believe you're responsible for it.
I cannot answer that. I'm not real sure what we would be able to clear out, but we would only be able to clear out that easement, not everything. So.
All right, thank you. Counselor Lehman, did you have a question on this application, this agenda item?
No audio.
It's on mute, Nate.
Unmute your page, Matt. There you go.
Sorry. I'm in favor of the project. Buck and our staff answered all my questions. Electricity is important.
Thank you. Are there other questions of the utility? If not, thank you very much.
Thank you.
This is a public hearing. Would anybody else like to come forward and make comment in regard to this project? Please come forward, state your name and address for the record, and welcome. Make public comment on this project? Seeing none, Counselor Whiting?
Move to close the public hearing.
Second.
I have a second with Counselor Luce. Further discussion? Counselor Luce?
Yeah, I just hope that while they're in there and they need to get their vehicle through, that they'll take care of much of that buckthorn as they can, because I've had complaints from neighbors, and it is a noxious weed and needs to be taken care of.
Thank you. Motion and second to close the public hearing. Discussion. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Those opposed? Motion passes. Thank you. Counselor Whiting?
I'll offer Resolution 7900, a resolution ordering an improvement and preparation of plans and specifications for the Shakopee Public Utilities Shakopee Avenue Electric Undergrounding Project number 2017-9, and move its adoption.
I have a motion and a second by Counselor Luce.
Second.
Yep. Discussion?
I think
Counselor Lehman?
No, he was seconding it.
It's a good project. Electricity is important. Maintaining this stuff is important. I think it's a worthwhile project.
Thank you very much. A motion and a second on the table. Further discussion? Discussion. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All
Aye.
those in favor? Nay. Motion passes. Thank you very much. Moving ahead now, we can recess for the Economic Authority meeting. And Counselor Lehman, are you going to run that as president?
I'm running.
Mayor, I'm asking the EDA to have the vice president run the meeting tonight.
Very good. Kathy?
So we'll call the Economic Development Authority meeting to order. Ms. Henson, would you please make note of the roll? And can I get an approval of the agenda? Commissioner Mars,
Second.
and seconded by Commissioner Whiting. All those in favor say aye.
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 Those opposed, motion passes. And consent business. Commissioner Whiting.
Make a motion to approve the consent business, which includes the EDA minutes and the EDA bill list.
And a second?
Second.
Seconded by Commissioner Luce. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? And motion passes. And on to general business. Approval for redevelopment of City Hall and First Avenue properties.
Thank you, Madam President. As Mr. Kursky is going to get up here and talk a little bit about it, I wanted an opportunity to talk to you prior to that happening a little bit about the importance of downtown redevelopment and how development and redevelopment are two different animals. It's development in and of itself can be relatively easy from a construction management perspective, in that you essentially have a blank slate, and you get to put on the blank slate what you have. As we look, excuse me, at both the specifically the City Hall project here, as you all know, in both 2016 and 2017, this was one of the high items that you wanted us to work on as part of our work plan. We were very fortunate in that we received, as Mr. Kursky made some outreach to individuals in the greater metropolitan area, that we actually received some interest in this particular building. That's a surprise, frankly, to me. I expected this building to stay on the market for some time. There are many similar cities that find themselves in this situation, where they built new city halls and their city halls have been remained vacant for years. But we really do have a special opportunity, as Mr. Kursky outlines in his memo. When we're talking about redevelopment, it's not as easy as putting something on a blank piece of land. Sometimes it takes the city to do a little more. Sometimes it takes us to actually put particular projects together. Sometimes it takes us to destroy what's on the property at the current time, and sometimes it takes us to put a little something into the kitty to try to get people enticed to take that risk in redeveloping a particular property. I like to talk about redevelopment as compare it to, we are not, when it comes to redevelopment, we're not the high school quarterback that everybody wants to date. We're the 50-year-old man who has seen his better days long past him. And this is a 50-year-old man we're dealing with here. And so what we need to do is to spruce the 50-year-old man up and try to put him in a position to be successful into the future. So with that being said, Mr. Kursky, you can go ahead and jump into this and talk a little bit about the particular details of the project.
Vice Chair and members of the
definition a little bit. We're a 50-year-old man with big pockets.
Mr. Kursky.
Thank you, Mr. Reynolds. This has been a project long in the making. I know that when I first came here, there was a lot of push to try and get something to happen with City Hall. I think we've been lucky. We've had some interest from developers. The current development before you tonight is actually the first real proposal that we've gotten that actually I think makes some good economic sense for the city, because it's tying two projects together. The first is the building we're sitting in right now and getting that done kind of in the short term, but long term, one of the things that is really necessary for a downtown and helps its stability are things like hotels, because what they do is every night they bring a new visitor to your city, and that really will drive some of the things that community members have talked about, like additional retail and restaurants, because that becomes very attractive. If you're a restaurant, that gives you 7 nights a week of all new customers, and so it gives you that kind of hump that the locals will use it for a special event or a birthday or anniversary or on the weekends, but typically they don't go out on the weeknights. But people staying in hotels really are looking for something to do. So I think these are both catalytic projects, and I'm going to kind of walk you through some of the steps here. So the areas outlined in green are currently the downtown improvement projects. So what we're trying to do is leverage all of our resources here. This really sets the stage kind of for a new image for downtown. The two areas in red, one is City Hall, the other is the First Avenue properties, and another property that's actually in the old name of the HRA, which was the predecessor to the current EDA. So that's right over along the water here. So the city owns this back part of the property and the alley, and these are the properties later in the meeting the city council will be discussing acquiring. So one of the things that we've been working with our consultants on is how do we look at this in a bigger picture? So it'd be great to get these 2 projects done, but how can we leverage that? So we've been working with our city attorney and their staff and some consultants on looking at a potential redevelopment area. We have some additional steps we'll be taking and bringing back to you. We had a much larger area to begin with, and it's slowly been shrinking down, but what we're going to try and do is take the new improvements you see downtown, take that revenue and reinvest it back in downtown. So to really help these projects move along, but also do some of the public infrastructure that's necessary. So one of the things just conceptually might happen down the road is as the TIF begins to work and revenue comes in, we might take a look at improving, for instance, the sidewalks near the potential hotel site to make it better for people to get to the downtown. So those are just some of the ideas. And again, this is just a conceptual area that we're looking at. We are required by state statute to do a study for a potential, this would be a renovation TIF. So as you know, we've done economic development TIFs. We really have not done any redevelopment TIFs. This will be kind of one that's in between. It's not quite as long as a redevelopment TIF, which is 25 years. I believe it's 15 years for this TIF, and that allows us to get 100% of the increment to reinvest in this area. So as Mr. Reynolds mentioned, we reached out and we've had some good discussions with CPM. They're, I think, the 8th largest developer in the Twin Cities. They've done a lot of really interesting projects. We did have the opportunity to actually tour this project. This is right off 8th Street in Minneapolis, but a similar style project to what they propose for the City Hall site. It's mostly few 2-bedrooms, 1-bedrooms, and efficiency kind of studios. That's a market right now that's really not being filled in Shakopee, and region-wide, it's kind of the growing market right now. There's been a lot of market studies done on Shakopee in the region, and that really fits the need for a lot of our professionals that are working at Intrust Data Card, Emerson, these young engineers that don't want to buy a house, for instance, right away, that want to move into a community. Right now, they're not living in our community because we don't really offer this kind of more modern apartment with a lot of amenities. So this is what would be downtown. They'd be able to take advantage of some of the restaurants and retail and bars downtown and still be in a really convenient location. So this project just finished up, and it's in its final rent up, and it does have, as we're also proposing on this site down here, CPM has opened a small kind of bar. It's called Tilt. It's something I think is really interesting. It's the old pinball games. They had them restored and refurbished, and so it's a pretty interesting concept. It's becoming pretty common, kind of people going back to their childhood. But we would look preferably on this corner of the site over here to have a retail component to really activate that street. So this is actually the City Hall site. They've done some test layouts to make sure that this project will fit. So this is along Home Street. This would end up being retail with some amenities. Typically they have a kind of a lounge room that has a refrigerator, stove, so people can have bigger parties. It would have a rooftop amenity and also a workout room. Parking would be under the building here. Hopefully where the basement is, they still haven't done some, still have some work to do on the feasibility analysis, but to basically implode the basement to keep the hole and basically do underground parking along with some under building parking, and we'd still have some surface parking in the rear. And again, these are just some test layouts, but this is kind of how the building would lay out. It's basically 5 floors of units. The corners tend to be the larger units because you get more windows. They have a really interesting concept to do this keystone here that really provides a lot more window, light, and air into the project. And here's a bigger blow-up of a similar project. So it would be about 60 feet tall, taller on the first floor to give us that kind of historic retail space. And you can see here the layout of the units. So the units on the corner, again, I said, these have some 2 bedrooms. We're not sure what the final layout will be, but it'll be something similar to this. And this is just a rendering. They're working on a similar project in Minneapolis on an almost similar sized site, but a lot of glass at the street level to really allow some visibility. Particularly at night, it'll be lit. And this is the corner that would have the retail space in it down here. And again, this is just conceptual. Materials will change, but we're working with them to, on the first floor, probably a combination of brick and some stone. On the upper floors, it'll probably be Nichia or some kind of hardy panel with some other kind of masonry. But this will give you an idea of some of the scale. Rooftop amenities are a really important piece. The one they have in Minneapolis is used a lot. And I think here, because of the location, you'll get some really good views. This is the proposed site for the hotel. So, excuse me, this is a road right away that would be abandoned. There are some utilities that we'll have to work on that run through this alley, but this would be the ultimate site. They've done a test fit on this, but I didn't want to show it to you because after they did it, they realized all the views are really to the river and they had them up on the corner. So ESG, who's our architect as we move forward, this will be back to you for many stages. Public hearing, for instance, for the TIF, it'll be back for a development agreement. All of the things you've seen tonight will be refined before they move forward. They have talked about doing more of a boutique brand here. They already have a DoubleTree. This is their DoubleTree that's in Minneapolis, so they are partners with Hilton. They did tell us that one of the mistakes they made on this project is they designed the building first before they went to Hilton, and then Hilton said, good, now you can redesign it to our standards. So what they want to do is work with their architect now, see what the best kind of brand match is, and work with us, and then go to Hilton or Marriott, whoever they choose, and make sure it works before they spend a lot of money on the design. But the goal here is to do something that's currently not in the market, a little bit more of a hipper hotel, more boutique feel, not your standard chain. This is the site. So this really benefits, they think, and we agree, with some great views up and down the river. It's really a rare opportunity we have in the community. And this is just a concept. This is one of the brands they're looking at, but they have a requirement to have kind of an outdoor feature, and that's something they would probably do facing the river. So it would probably be a bar, restaurant on the upper floor. The other thing that we had a good discussion with, and they're doing additional research, is we heard from the chamber and from River South, we are short on kind of quality meeting space for both businesses and functions. So they're looking at doing 6,000 to 10,000 square feet of that space in the hotel, along with they are operators and partners in about 6 different restaurants in the Twin Cities. They would look to do a full-service restaurant in the hotel as one of, to help downtown kind of anchor this in, but also be a amenity for the guests at the hotel. And another feature they're looking at is, so during the week you get the business customers. We are a pretty big destination market for weddings. So Turtle Social Hall has a lot of events throughout the wedding season. There's not a hotel nearby. They would work with some of the downtown restaurants and businesses to become kind of the home anchor for guests that are going to those weddings. So it's a really good opportunity to kind of play off what we already have and really make it much better. So this is outlined in the resolution that both the EDA would consider and the city council, but the city would look at the current building for asbestos. We've had a couple of estimates already. To do that, it would be destructive testing, so we kind of have to wait till we get to the point where we're going to move out, because they'll be putting holes in the walls and the ceilings. But that's one of the critical pieces. If you have a lender or equity coming into a project, they want to make sure they're not buying our liability for asbestos and other materials. Transfer of ownership of the City Hall to the developer for $1. Consider providing some overflow parking. They think they're going to be able to park this site, but they wanted to make sure that guest parking could potentially be in the lot across the street. Examine again the feasibility of the TIF district we've talked about for both of these projects. Transfer ownership of the hotel site also for $1. Provide Met Council SAC credits, an amount to be determined. They have not done full performance yet. We'll be working with them on costs. I can tell you the other benefit of CPM is one of their partners is a general contractor. So they've already built the apartment building that could go here, so they have pretty hard numbers on it. They'll have to do a lot more work on the hotel and work with the brand on that. Relocate that stormwater pipe that's currently not in a recorded easement through that street. Consider vacation portions of Levy Drive west between Scott Street and Atwood Street north, adjacent to the hotel, and then work with the utilities to locate out of that alley. There are a number of utilities that have not gotten easements through that alley that we'll have to work with to get them relocated. In speaking with Julie Eddington, with our attorney's office, we can use TIF money to pay back a developer, for instance, on utility work. That is one of the eligible expenses. So there's a lot of utilities that are in that alley that will have to be moved. This is the preliminary commitment from CPM so that they would begin the demolition of City Hall by the end of this year. I think it's really critical for both us and them to get some activity going in the downtown. We're going to be moving out. I think in a lot of communities that would be seen as a bad sign. We're trying to set that this is a huge opportunity to bring 70 apartments with people with money in their pocket that want to spend their money in downtown. Again, construction up to 70 units of market rate housing, the provision of on-site parking for up to 50 cars based on their final site plan approval, completion of construction items 1, 2, and 3 by December 31st of 2018. So a year from December, they would be done and out of this project, and they would be in rent-up. And about their rough estimate, they're going to spend on construction about $8 million for this building. On the hotel side, work with us on a boutique-style hotel. I think the brand's going to be really important, and we and they have agreed to work together on that. Build a hotel with up to 110 rooms, subject to market demand analysis that they'd have to do. They would include at least 6,000 square feet of meeting space, subject to the final brand selection. They would work to include a full-service restaurant, subject to the final brand selection. So restaurants and bars have become really important now in hotels, particularly the more boutique ones. They used to be kind of a nice to have, but we aren't going to worry about it. They're really become critical. They are both a financial engine for the hotel, but also attract people that aren't staying at the hotel to the hotel. I'm sure some of you have seen the Aloft. They have a brand called XYZ Bar. Those bars are attended way more from people outside of the hotel than by hotel guests because they have a certain cachet to them that people want to go and experience that. And so their goal would be to really do a good restaurant and bar here that would not only serve the hotel, but also be additive to the downtown. The hotel development could include underground parking. They have looked at the site. There's a pretty good fall to the back. They have not done soil testing yet. We heard today there might be bedrock on the far back. But that's something we'll, as they move forward in design, we'll hammer out in the final development. They would invest $16 million in the hotel, subject to the final brand selection, and complete construction of the hotel development by December 31st, 2019. Happy to answer questions.
Questions of staff? Commissioner Luce.
The hotel, the parking for the bar, you say a lot of people are going to just stop in at the bar. Where are they going to park? They're not going to be using the underground parking, are they?
Mayor and commissioners and chairman, I think what we would do is make sure they have adequate parking for those guests. I mean, it's a pretty big site. Their preliminary tests showed they could do the rooms and overflow parking in there without any problem. The other thing is we have a lot of parking in downtown. Our goal eventually is to get people to walk from here over to there so that they could go from that hotel, restaurant, or bar down to, say, O'Brien's or Turtles to really get people walking in the downtown.
And in the apartments, you know, they're up to 70 units. Is there a minimum that we're going to make?
I think we can work on that towards, as we get the development agreement done. I think that they're going to need a minimum to make the numbers work. I'm going to assume it's probably going to be at least 60. But as they get into their financing and equity raise, they'll have a better idea on that. Their model in the Twin Cities right now is 70 has been pretty ideal, and they can fit 70 on this site.
And then one final question is, do we have any idea what the tax base is going to be on the hotel and on the apartment building as far as the city's third?
So if we were to do a TIF, that's the numbers I can give you for tonight. So apartments are exempt from the fiscal disparities calculation. So all in, based on other projects that are in this market, we think they would generate around $50,000 a year in property taxes. That's for all of the tax base. The hotel, it's a little different because we have to pay fiscal disparities on the hotel, and that cannot be included in a TIF. And the largest tax on a hotel is actually the state tax. So our share would be about $24,000.
Commissioner Whiting.
One concern I have is, in your rendering for the apartment building, is how it will fit with the rest of the historic district in Shakopee. And it looked like, from the design of the rendering, that it was more of the brick look and kind of that historic look. And I want to make sure that, I know we're a little putting the cart ahead of the horse here, but I want to make sure that those design guidelines follow through to the final project so that it looks like it fits downtown with our historic buildings. And it's not, obviously it's not going to be a historic building, but there's that kind of look left and look right and see, kind of what you want in the middle. And that obviously, to me, is a concern.
Commissioner, one of the things I'll say in other projects that I worked on in urban areas, it's really the lower two floors that are most important because that's what the pedestrian really sees or driver by really sees. So we'll work with them. I think at the upper floors, you're going to see a variety of materials. This looks like brick, but it really isn't. That's Nietzsche High and some other materials. You saw the one that's in Minneapolis is kind of in the arts district, so it has a whole art theme to the whole building, including the artwork in the halls. I think we'll work with them on, what's the right design and fit for Shakopee. The same architect that did this design has been engaged to do this site here. So I think they're pretty creative, and we'll work with them.
Thank you.
Commissioner Mars.
That's right, President Michael. Some of these conditions here, the developer portion of it, 10, 11, 12, mention the word could. If we were in partnership with this developer to do these projects, that's why I'm asking about the word could. How do we know when those will be firmed up? I mean, if we think meeting space is real important, that'd be something we would want for sure. A full service restaurant, that would be a great need in our community, especially in the downtown area. How do we shore that up?
Commissioner, I think our goal is this was kind of the negotiating point list to work from and bring back a development agreement. They really need to get with their potential hotel partner and figure out which one they're going to pick and start running their numbers. We did a STAR report, which is a comparable analysis of all the rates in the area, which we have provided to the developer. I think that gave them enough confidence that they think the 110 rooms will work here. I think that's why we left, for instance, the SAC credit kind of open. Depending on what they come back with as part of their analysis, that's kind of going to be a give and take that we'll bring back to you all to discuss. If you wanted that, this is what the cost is, and here's where we're going to have to make it up. This is a pretty risky project. Both this site, it's an unproven market in the downtown. The hotel is the same way. So what we're trying to do is get the best for everyone, make sure that it's successful. And so I think they're going to have to fine tune their numbers and their pro forma, and we'll bring that back to you.
Thank you.
Commissioner Luce.
Well, in my definition, could equals big pockets. They're going to want, and they're going to want a lot in order to get everything that's on this list. So we're going to be paying. So just so everybody's aware of that. But also, Mr. Vice President, some of the wording that you have on what we require already here is investments of the word at least, and $8 million for the apartment and $16 million for the hotel. Those of at least, right, of value. Is that what you're saying?
Correct.
Okay.
And I think, again, that's the at least number. We all know on this side, on the staff side and the developer side, those are kind of the minimum numbers. They know based on construction they're doing right now that those at least numbers are what they're paying today. Again, they have not built in Shakopee. We're not sure yet what it's going to take to get rid of this building and what we're going to encounter. I think on the other site, it's still a lot of unknowns. So I look at these as more of a public-private partnership where you need those catalytic projects. So the first projects on the scale of what the city has to contribute tend to be a little higher. as other developments come along, that scale goes down, and the benefit of a TIF district is all that increment goes back into that TIF district to help the whole area.
Thank you, Mr. Kursky. I think I agree with you in that, because we saw that with our development that we did our tax abatement and TIF, and we brought in a few businesses with that, but the rest that came in on their own, and I think that that's something that we saw when we did with businesses. So, did the applicant have any comment?
Go ahead.
Developer with CPM. Appreciate it, listening to this, considering this resolution tonight. I've heard your comments, and this is really looked at as the first step in a true partnership in getting these projects done. You know, like Michael said, which he addressed it perfectly, the Chroma, the first more colorful one, was a completely different neighborhood than what Harlow is, which was the darker one. So those, we really are active and conscious of making sure that we're not only building something that economically works, but also is activated within the neighborhood that we're working in. So I think this is the first step in what'll be a interesting process. Haven't gone through this before, and so we're looking forward to doing it. We'll definitely be back looking for your input, and yeah, if you have any questions for me, please let me know, but look forward to it.
I understand this is your first suburban project, is that correct?
We are doing a project down in Rochester currently. Yep. And we have a handful of properties in St. Cloud and one that we're looking at right now as a new development.
Okay. Any
But
questions?
yeah, we are, our bread and butter is urban infill, tight sites, complicated projects that isn't in the middle of a cornfield, which we'll probably start doing more of. A little easier.
Any questions of the applicant? Commissioner Mars?
That's right, President. What do you, I followed your company for many years, and you have associations with doing some hotel projects and now some apartment projects. As an infill developer, what do you think are your top couple risks here in Shakopee?
That's a great question. Given the age of this building, how hard I mean, that is the biggest one on this site, is how hard is it gonna be to take the building down? And how do we ultimately park it? I think, environmental is something that, at all times, is something that we get concerned about, but, that environmental is kind of a broader scope, considering environmental is, there's lead or asbestos or something in the ground, to also what's underneath the soil, bedrock, is there unsuitable, is it backfilled? Because a lot of times we see that where a building's knocked over, and it's just layer of dirt over the top, and the new building's built on top of it, so.
Do you think the demand for a product is there? There's been many articles in the recent several months, if not the last year, and seeing apartment style going up in the metro area here. You feel the demand is strong enough to warrant that?
Oh, absolutely, and I spoke with Marquette Advisors last week, and we're actually engaging with them on doing a pretty extensive feasibility analysis for not only the immediate Shakopee market, but kind of how it spreads down, because we are seeing population shift is coming tighter into the metro. Star Tribune just had an article that I think by 2030 we're going to be 71,000 units short.
Yeah.
So a lot of that's not one demographic. That's the entire housing demand that we're going to have. So.
Great. Thank you.
Any other questions of the applicant? Matt?
Not against the project per se. I don't like the TIF. I think the tax revenue from the property should go toward the general priority services in the community, like everybody else's. And I don't like giving away so many taxpayer assets. Other than that, I think the project could benefit a lot of the area and the community.
Okay, thank you, President.
Thank you.
The other thing I'd like to add is that I think one of the benefits of been working with CPM is they've been in the trenches. The two partners actually came out here, met with the administrator and I. They actually toured us through their projects. I mean, they take a lot of pride in their development. They've been pretty successful, and I think that they don't just jump at every deal that comes along, so I think we're lucky to have them at the table.
Any other questions? Mr. Whiting?
Just a comment, for 40 or 50 years, we've been talking about what we can do to enhance downtown. The city has put together the downtown improvement areas, and we're working on it. Over the years, we've fixed up Huber Park. We've got a lot more bars downtown here, and a couple of restaurants. So that's great. This is a huge opportunity. RAR took part of our west end and took care of that for us. Did a great development down there. This is what spurs on new projects and future growth, and this is just an exciting opportunity in my mind, and I look forward to seeing what comes out of it. So with that, I would offer to approve resolution number 2017-1.
And Commissioner
I'll
Morris?
second that.
I have a motion and a second. All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Let's have some more discussion.
Oh, you want some more discussion?
Opposed? I'm opposed.
Did you have a question or
Question?
discussion?
No, my comment on this site, I'm all in favor of this site. I think it'd be a great deal to have an apartment building here. It should fit the way they're showing everything. I'm just a little leery of the giveaway here. It's not as bad as the other site we're talking about. The other site, if Mr. Reynolds will remember back at least a year ago, we talked about that site, and I was all in on that site. I mean, I think that's a prime site that we have. Perfect situation for a hotel, rooftop bar, restaurant, whatever is gonna, the view is gonna be unbelievable. I just don't wanna give away too much.
Commissioner Whiting?
Can I make a comment?
Hold on. We're not at that stage yet. We haven't looked at that TIF numbers. We're just,
I know, I'm just making a comment.
Right. That's what my comment was.
President Lehman?
The value on the city hall is a little over $2 million. The value on all the other properties is about $750. I mean, we're looking at almost $3 million, and then any tax revenue is going to go into a special account and not go toward basic services like police, fire, streets, and these things. And I just fundamentally disagree with that. We're not a welfare state for for-profit businesses, which we seem to be becoming.
Commissioner Mars?
Thank you. I think this is a unique opportunity to enhance our community as well as our downtown. I think to put 70 units right downtown of market rate apartments is awesome. I think for a hotel to come and turn whatever they turn every weekend, unique visitors. I have friends at Amazon, I have friends at Entrust Data Card that are always looking for overnight stays when their company comes. We do have hotels, but to be closer, compact into our downtown offers, if this were to move forward, offers a great unique situation for visitors. Let's remind everybody that we do have the River South organization with the major 4 attractions. We generate 10 million visitors a year to our surrounding community, and to capture them to stay overnight would be great. I am careful too on the risks that the city takes in exchange for what we could get, and I do believe that there's a City Hall. I've never heard that it's valued at $2 million, and
County's website.
Huh? It's on
That's the
county
county's
website?
valuation.
Okay, and how much taxes does that turn into the general fund?
0, it's exempt because it's government.
Okay, and so I think something to turn a piece of property like this back into the tax rolls, and the TIF still needs to be analyzed a little bit, but I think this is a unique opportunity for the city of Shakopee.
Commissioner Luce?
I agree with you. I just, the devil's gonna be in the details, for sure. We need to work out the give and take.
I concur with Commissioner Mars. I think this is a unique opportunity for our community, and we needed something that's going to spurn the development for the rest of downtown, and this is what the business leaders have asked us to do, is to look at what can be done with this city hall and not leave it vacant. And the worst thing that we could do is leave this vacant for 5-10 years. And so when I hear that CPM has never done a suburban project before, and that our Mr. Kursky wrote to them and they said, we're interested, I think that that's a big deal. So with that, I would, all those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed?
Me,
So vote passes 4-1. On to the facade improvement loan. Mr. Kursky.
Good evening again. So this is just a small loan, but the good news is it will keep a homegrown Shakopee company in town. They're known as the Soup Ladies, but they're going to move out of their existing warehouse space. Because some changes in federal legislation, they're not going to be doing actual food production here. They're outsourcing that to a company largely in Wisconsin, but they're going to open a retail store where they'll be able to sell their soups. Right now, they're sold on QVC. Target's one of their big customers, but they have thought for years to have a retail store that would sell their products and other Minnesota products that they've met through the years would be a huge opportunity. So they have negotiated a lease on this property down here, and this funding would go to kind of the first step on the renewal, renovation, restoration of that building. The awning that was on there has been taken off, and you can see where the glass is and the steel that actually holds it up. The owner's original plan was just to kind of cover that all up, and thought about it some more and said, look, I can afford to do this much now, but you know, as we go down the road and downtown improves, I'm willing to take the risk and do some, you know, more restoration on that storefront. So I think this is a
can you
really
turn that camera to the right?
There you go.
Thank you.
This is a great opportunity for not very much money in the facade program to take a building that's been kind of neglected a little bit, turn it around and get a great tenant in there, and really help kind of that. They're a business that will generate a significant amount of both pedestrian and vehicular traffic downtown and will help the other businesses. When they heard potentially there's a hope and a dream maybe of a hotel downtown, they were ecstatic because that's their customer. It's people visiting that want to buy Minnesota wild rice or their special soups. So it's a great opportunity. And the applicant's here and he'd be happy to answer any questions.
Any questions of staff? Invite the applicant to make any comment. Mr. Wormuskirchen, welcome.
Thank you. 1882 Groveland Way. The property that we're talking about is the 110 First Avenue East. It's a building I've owned for almost 20 years, and I was lucky enough to have the right retail partners in there, but the building became vacant. If you haven't toured the building, the yoga studio above it is phenomenal, what she did and how they did that. So it's important to do something different with the building. I've had lots of phone calls, but it was always office space, nothing that really enticed me. It's going to cost me more money to put this company in the building, but I've been around a long time, a big believer in the downtown. I kind of eat and bleed it, as you probably all know. So I knew that this building had to have a reface, especially with them coming in. So this facade is basically going to be some brickwork that's going to be done, tuck pointing on the front. We did find a historic beam on the front, so we're going to highlight that and kind of paint some of the highlights and put some new awnings on the building and new paint and new doors, fix up the window parts too. So this is a big opportunity for them. They haven't been in retail before, so they're very excited to get all the suggestions to get in there. It's going to be a big draw for this region to come here to get this type of product. So I'm here mainly to talk about the facade, if anybody has any questions.
Any questions of the applicant? Seeing none, thank you.
All right, thank you. You got a,
Commissioner Mars.
Mr. Vice President, I'll make a motion to approve entering into a facade improvement loan with Dwayne Werskirchen in the amount not to exceed $10,000 for a term of 5 years, and authorize staff to execute appropriate documents.
Motion and a second by Counselor, or Commissioner Luce.
It was,
Oh, okay, go ahead.
I'm seconding it, but I'm also going to not vote on it because I do work for Dwayne and I don't feel it appropriate that I vote on something where I may gain, so.
Okay, all right. President Lehman.
I support the proposal. It's consistent with our existing policy. I have one question. Has this property received a loan in the last 5 years?
no.
Okay, thank you.
All right, and with that, I will take a vote. All those in favor say aye.
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 All those opposed? Motion passes 4-2 with 1 abstention.
Thank you.
Okay. And Commissioner Mars.
Mr. Vice President, I'll make a motion to adjourn to July 18, 2017 at 7 p.m.
And seconded by Commissioner Luce. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those
Aye.
opposed? Motion passes. We are adjourned.
We will reconvene the City of Shakopee City Council meeting for June 20th. And, excuse me, we will move on to 11A1, vacation of an easement at 2400 Jennifer Lane, and Mr. Noble will present. Welcome.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, members of the council. Application before you is a request for a vacation of public easement. Property in question is 2400 Jennifer Lane. Screen identifies the site, property owner that the city's been working with. The city is the applicant. Property owner we have been working with is Michael Bowick. His property was part of a minor subdivision in conjunction with Jennifer Lane improvement.
Public hearing.
This is not a public hearing.
A public hearing for this was held last October 2016. Planning Commission reviewed it back then as well and had forwarded a recommendation of approval. We're now in June, so it's been a long process. We've spent quite a bit of time with the applicant, or again, city's applicant, with the property owner and the city staff and Shakopee Public Utility staff. Again, the property was part of a minor subdivision. On the screen, you can see this line was a former property location, and as part of this minor subdivision, the new property line was established here, which really rendered that easement not very feasible. It ran through part of the Bowick's property. Didn't really make sense for utilities to be located in that. So again, the city worked with them to come up with some kind of a new concept. And the proposed easement, you can see, is identified in this yellow area, a 15-foot easement that would, hopefully you can see this screen. I've got a couple slides. Property owner does have a fence located real close to the property line, so this easement, typically we see 10-foot easements around perimeters. In this case, we worked out an agreement for 15 feet so that if utilities are located in that easement, that there's some additional space to make sure we're not in conflict with the existing fence. You can see there's some trees behind the fence. Believe that the easement proposed would not infringe or cause damage to those trees. And we've been working on this for many months, and we've put together a draft easement document that all parties, the applicant or the property owner has reviewed, the city has reviewed, city engineering, public works, Shakopee Public Utilities. I think everybody feels pretty good about the language in that easement. That's why we're coming forward at this time with an agreement that supports creation of a new easement along this line and vacate the easement that's in the area identified as blue. So staff is recommending that you approve a resolution supporting this vacation of public drainage utility easement with condition that a new easement be recorded. Are there any questions from staff?
Questions of staff? Counselor Lehman, is this one that you had a couple questions on? All right, we can come back to him. Questions of staff? I have a question. So the easement was running parallel to his fence. The new easement does not encroach on the landowner's fence, is that correct?
I'll refer to this slide, this Exhibit A. The previous or the existing easement ran along the perimeter of his former front property line. With the reconfiguration of the lots, this is now his new property line. There's a rather large easement here for the road, and then the fence is on the east side of this area identified in yellow, so it's 15 feet behind that fence.
In between the trees and the fence then?
That's the
Okay.
plan.
All right.
Again, we spent quite a bit of time going over the easement document proposed and make sure that if we need to get into that easement, there's ways to get into that new easement without causing damage to fence or landscaping, or to minimize the damage. And if there is some, then we'll work with the property owner to rectify the issue, so.
Okay. Other questions of staff? If not, thank you.
Thank you.
Would the applicant and or their representative like to come forward and make comment on this, or? Welcome, state your name and address for the record, and welcome.
Michael Bowick, 2400 Jennifer Lane. Like Mr. Noble said, this has been in the works for a long time. I've been before you guys before. So I think this is finally something that we can all agree on. It suits everybody's needs. It gets rid of an easement that's in the middle of the property that doesn't do anybody any good and just going to cause harm in the future. So,
Thank you. Questions of the applicant? If not, thank you, and I'm glad that even with the long delay that everybody is amenable to this new easement.
thank you.
Thank you. Counselor Whiting?
Offer to adopt resolution 7782. Oh.
Yeah, well, let's go ahead.
Approving a vacation of a public drainage and utility easement adjacent to 2400 for Jennifer Lane. Move its adoption.
I have a motion, and Counselor Mokel seconds, and then discussion. I just want to, Matt, we can't see you, but I've heard you. Do you said that you had a question or concern on this?
I actually think that what he said, Mr. Mayor, is that he had no problems with this particular issue.
Okay. All right. Well, I'm sorry that we can't see you, nor can we hear you right at this second on that. Motion and a second on the table. Further discussion? Discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Those opposed? Motion passes. Thank you. Moving ahead then, 11A2, purchase agreement with Buha Properties, and Michael Kursky will present. Welcome.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. This is one of two purchase agreements on your agenda tonight. This first one is for the small house on the corner. It's currently vacant, so we would acquire that and secure it. And the second agreement is to purchase the remainder of that property for the redevelopment. That would be done next year.
Just the small house on this one?
Just the small houses on the first one, sir.
Got it. We're not here to discuss the price. Counselor Whiting? Or
Questions of staff outside of price? Counselor? I have heard nothing on price, so I have no idea what we're buying. Okay.
So
It's in the documents.
The price is in the document, and the legal description is there. Did you have a question, Counselor Whiting?
No, I was
You're
gonna-
going at full market value is what you're going. We're going out, it's in the recital. Part of the purchase agreement, it's listed. So, on page 2.
There we go.
Okay. We're,
Hello.
you have a question on 11A2?
I did not have any questions on, I voted on that on EDA, so my same questions apply.
Okay.
This is not the EDA matter.
Thompson, is a different property, Matt.
Mr. Mayor, members of the council, the EDA matter was the approval of the preliminary terms of development agreement. This is a specific land acquisition.
Yes.
So Councilmember Lehman, this was not on the EDA agenda. This is the purchase price for the small house, purchase of the small house. And the purchase price in the agreement is $125,000.
Yep. So,
Yeah, I understand, but what I said in EDA was I don't believe the taxpayer should be buying the properties and giving them to big development.
okay. Other questions of staff? If not, Counselor Lewis?
Not really a question. We're looking to pay $125,000 and the county's got the market value at $117,600. I mean, and from my understanding, the house is abandoned, in poor shape.
It's very common that a seller gets in excess of their assessed value.
For a house that's abandoned?
There's a lot more to it than just the value of the house. So, Counselor, Mr. Reynolds?
Well, I think it's important to understand that the house really has no value in and of itself. The value comes from the land, and the whole purpose of purchasing the house is to make the land available as we look to try to put together properties to then further redevelop.
Counselor Whiting?
Just want to comment, years ago, we set aside money in a fund to acquire properties for this exact purpose. So this is currently funding is from the property acquisition fund. And with that,
okay,
I will offer resolution 7901 to acquire 339 First Avenue West. It says 100 here. I'm not sure what that is, but
that's the correct address. Don't.
Okay, don't
I have
ask.
no idea
just-
why. sir.
Okay, and the PID number is 2700108110.
I have a motion, and Counselor Moco second, and discussion, Counselor Lewis?
Yeah, it's my understanding, talking to people in the industry, that the normal way of doing this is we go in, we set a price, we agree on, and we give them $1,000 to hold it for a year, and contingent upon the rest of the project going forward. We're gonna go in and buy this property, we're stuck with it. We buy this property and the one next to it, how much we have left in our fund to purchase properties?
Well, we're assembling property to make
I understand that,
another
but
property
what is the
even more
total
attractive.
in our fund? From my understanding, we're gonna have a big fat zero in there. when we're
Probably.
done.
Counselor Lehman?
Government shouldn't be in the business of using tax dollars to buy private properties to give away to developers, period.
Further there is a motion and a second on the table. Further discussion? Discussion. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed?
Me,
Abstain. Not enough info.
Okay, motion passes 3-1 with one abstain. Thank you very much. Moving ahead then to 11A3, approval of a redevelopment of City Hall and First Avenue projects. And Michael will present. Welcome. Did you actually go sit down? Okay, good.
For a second,
You
sir.
sign in?
Mayor and Council, this is, we're doing, at advice of the city attorney, we're doing agreements for both the EDA and the city council because some of the property in this redevelopment's owned by the city and some of it's owned in a predecessor of the current EDA. That's why you see this on here. Also, as part of the potential incentives or whatever we do down the road, their advice was to have the agreement adopted by both bodies.
Okay, Counselor Whiting?
It looks like the exact same verbiage from the one we passed in the EDA, is that correct?
Councilmember Whiting, yes, they're identical.
Okay. Questions of staff? Counselor Mokel?
I'd like to make a motion to approve resolution number 7903.
Second.
I have a motion and a second by Counselor Whiting. Further discussion? Counselor Lehman?
Same position as I had during the EDA meeting. We're giving away too much in public or taxpayer assets and for $1. And the TIF will generate $0 toward basic services.
Okay. And further discussion? Discussion. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Those opposed?
Aye.
Abstain. Motion passes 3-1 with 1 abstain. Thank you very much. Moving ahead then to item 11A4, West Veerling Apartments, Acres Apartments, and Kyle Sabota will present. Welcome.
Thank you, Mayor, members of the council. Amcon Construction, represented by Dennis Cornelius, has made an application for a rezoning, planned unit development amendment, and a conditional use permit, as well as a final plat. Sorry, I'm just pulling up the presentation here. And this is for the site at the Hy-Vee, the West Veerling Acres PUD. And this is for the development of the multifamily site that is part of the PUD. So you've seen this property before you before in the PUD concept review through the development of the Hy-Vee site, and now before you this evening. So this is the site that's located on the west side of the community. It's highlighted in red. The parcel that's to the north here is for ponding area. This is Veerling Drive to the north. This is Adams Street to the west. And this is the exit ramp for 169 southbound. This is the site that for the proposed 133 unit apartment building. And this is the current cul-de-sac or temporary cul-de-sac for Harvest Lane. So this is an elevation of what the applicant is proposing to construct. It's a 133 unit apartment building. It would be 4 stories in the middle portion of the building and then 3 stories on the ends. As you can see here, this would be the 3-story portion of the building and 3-story portion with 4 stories, and this shows the landscape parking lot. So this is the elevations from the different angles on the property. Before you this evening is the PUD amendment regarding the change in the proposed building design. When the West Veerling Acres PUD was approved, there was an apartment building that was approved as part of that development as a 100 unit apartment building, and it had a pitched roof. So you can note this hashed line here is the approximate or roof line of the previously approved building. And then this just shows the elevations from the other angles that are similar to what you just saw on the last slide. So the proposal is 133 units of market rate apartments, which would be a total density of 18.6 units per acre. The R3 zone that this property is currently zoned allows for up to 14 units per acre, which is what the council had approved as part of the PUD. And so the site is currently zoned R3, and but it is guided for high-density residential development by the comp plan. That was done, that was approved by the council with the development of the West Veerling Acres PUD. So as the applicant has proposed, there'd be 13 studio units, 72 one-bedroom units, and 48 two-bedroom units in the development. So the applications that are before you this evening for your review is the rezoning from R3 to R4 to allow density greater than 14 units per acre on the site. Conditional use permit for an overheight structure, which would be a 46-foot tall building. The R4 zone allows 45 feet. And a PUD amendment to change the design of this building from the site from the previously approved building that had a different building materials, a different building design, and also a different number of units. and then a final plat, which is required to make this lot a buildable lot. Currently, it is an outlot as part of the West Veerling Acres development. So this is the site plan that the applicant has submitted for your review. It shows an access to Harvest Lane, and it also shows that there would be a sidewalk connecting to the existing end of Harvest Lane. And then it's a little tough to see because of the screen there, but there would be a sidewalk connection to the Hy-Vee grocery store that would be off of this access. So the parking lot here, there's a lot of green space between the existing single-family residential units. That's been a major topic of discussion for the developer, as well as the adjacent property owners and the planning commission. And so the applicant has also submitted a landscape plan. This is the site plan concept that was submitted. I'll be showing the landscape plan later that shows a berm on the northern part of the property here of this green space. You can see the building is kind of an L-shaped building, with the middle portion of the building being 4 stories and the end portions being 3. The applicant is also proposing to have a rooftop patio that would face away from the adjacent residences, and there would be a connection, pedestrian connection to the grocery store. In the report, I've mentioned that staff's recommendation is to have that adjusted to connect better to this is the current end of the sidewalk system for the Hy-Vee grocery store, to have that location shifted to better access that, which would involve some work on the Hy-Vee site. So there's surface parking and also underground parking. You can see the access on the north side. So that is the proposed site plan for the building. So this is the floor plan of the building. This is the garage level, showing the underground parking spaces as well as some of the mechanical or storage areas that would be part of the development. This is the first floor of the building, and also there's common space, a lounge area, the leasing office. The different colors note the different types of units, whether the yellows are 1-bedroom units, the blue units are 2 bedrooms, and the red units are studios. So that is the first floor. This is the second floor, same color codes apply, and also the third floor. Those are all residential units, and then the stair accesses. And this is the fourth floor, and as I said, that's only the middle portion of the building. And then there's the rooftop patio that is on the left side here, with some tables and seating.
Great.
So for the conditional use permit, the applicant's reason for applying for the conditional use permit is they'd like to have 9-foot ceilings within their units, and also for the elevations for the grading for the access to the underground parking. It raises the elevation of the building a bit, so the applicant wasn't able to meet the 45-foot height standard, so they've made an application for 1 additional foot. They're looking at having a flat roof building design. If they were to have a pitched roof, the building would be even taller than what they've proposed. So as part of the conditional use permit request, the applicant submitted a shadow study showing the shadows that would be cast on June 21st and September 21st. So you can see that the shadows actually do not make it across the parking lot onto the adjacent residential properties. In both cases, that's 1 hour before sunset. And then the shadows being cast on the Hy-Vee building weren't really of a concern for the morning hours. So for parking, the applicant's proposing 266 parking spaces, which 120 of the spaces would be indoors and 146 would be outdoor. The total average is 2.02 spaces per unit, and 63.9% of the units are studios or 1 bedroom. So the total parking ratio would be almost 1.5 spaces per bedroom. That's how we don't calculate parking requirements. We do it off of units. In a building, we don't consider bedrooms. A lot of cities do consider bedrooms. They get probably a more accurate parking requirement because of the needs of a 3-bedroom unit or a 2-bedroom unit are different than that of a studio for that. So the proposal that the applicant has brought forth is just shy of our parking requirements of 2.25 spaces. That's a standard that would be in place in the R3 zone. This site under R4, because of its proximity to public transit, would be 2.15 spaces per unit. So it's about 1/10 of a space per unit below what the code requires. Now, they do have proof of parking. If I went back to the site plan here, you can see that that the applicant is not providing, they have a larger green space here on the north for landscaping for the single-family houses. If there were to be a problem with parking, this area here could be used for additional parking. Now, this is the building elevation of the approved building, showing the pitched roof design, and that it was three levels. That was at 100 units. So this is the building that was approved already by the city council. There's different building materials, and so you can see that the height at the peak was very similar to what the proposed height is on this building. It's 1 foot different, 47 feet versus 46. The proposed building materials were EIFS, which is a synthetic stucco, and brick and cultured stone. So that's a change. The applicant is proposing fiber cement siding and more additional brick for the new building. Staff believes that those are higher quality materials than the synthetic stucco. In hailstorms, the synthetic stucco or EIFS can be damaged quite easily. So this is the approved site plan for the 100-unit building. It was just one long building, rectangular building, so there wasn't a lot of relief in that proposed design. And so overall, we believe that the applicant's proposed design fits the site better by having the L shape instead of just one large rectangle. This is the proposed grading plan for the entire area, including the ponds. So the orientation of the site is rotated to allow for better viewing. So this is Harvest Lane here, this is Veerling Drive. So there are 2 ponds that would be developed as part of this site. There's a existing gas pipeline that runs between, that's why the ponds are separated that way. So this is the northern pond. There's a proposed berm in this area for landscaping, for screening of the Freedom Townhomes to the east. And I'll be showing the landscape plan on a little bit later slide. And then this is the berm that was on the south side adjacent to the single-family residences. Now, the berm is mostly on the north side because there is some surface parking down here. So there is a bit of a grade change, but it's not as significant of a berm as on the northern side, which is about 4 to 5 feet. Staff is recommending that the applicant plant 7 to 8 foot tall evergreens at the time of planting. Their original proposal was for 5 feet, which is what our code requires. The Planning Commission supported that change as well. And so you can see the parking spaces, but this grading is to show the different berms.
I have a question on
Yes.
the northern west edge where you said there'd be a berm. There's some townhomes there.
Correct.
And
The
there looks like some of
townhomes
s-
would be in this area here where my cursor is
Right,
moving.
so there's gonna be a berm with trees there, and there are some trees existing already there. Are those will remain, and just the new berm and the new trees would be enhanced part of the landscaping?
Mayor Mars, members of the council, those trees are on the Freedom Townhomes property, so those would be staying. And the Hy-Vee, the developer, has been working with the Freedom Townhomes Association to supplement their landscaping, which was a requirement before for the Hy-Vee grocery store.
Thank you.
So they've been working with them, and from speaking with the applicant this evening, they've actually planted the trees already on the common space of the association. So this is beyond their site. The applicant this evening, Amcon Construction, would be doing plantings on this berm area, so there would be additional trees beyond what Hy-Vee has planted on the Freedom Townhome site. So this is the enlarged landscape plan, or grading plan, sorry, for the apartment units. You can see just the southern pond is shown here, and you can get a better look at the berm area adjacent to the parking. So if they were to need additional parking, that would cut into the berm area. So this is the landscape plan showing the trees adjacent to the Freedom Townhomes on that berm area. And then there would be trees along Harvest Lane as well. And then this is the trees that would be adjacent to the single-family residences. And there would also be trees adjacent to the grocery store drive area for the garage. So if I go back to the grading plan, you can see there's a slope. That was a topic of conversation when the Hy-Vee store was proposed about landscaping this area from the apartment buildings. This site is, the apartment building will be quite a bit higher than the parking lot, so we're recommending that taller trees be planted in this slope area as well. So, as I mentioned, there's multiple applications before your review, this including a final plat. This is the final plat lot, so it's essentially adding some drainage and utility easements and removing the outlot classification to the site. So that is the proposed lot as part of the final plat. So to compare to the approved plan that's in place right now, there's 33 additional units. This site would have additional landscaping because the developer has the screening that they've proposed to develop versus the approved plan. And also there's a larger building. So with a larger building, based on our landscaping requirements, larger buildings require more landscaping. So there'd be additional units based on the landscaping units based on the square footage. So the building materials is brick, decorative block, and fiber cement versus EIFS, cultured stone, and brick. There's the flat roof design versus the pitched roof, and the building footprint is designed for the site. There's also larger amount of resident amenities inside the building as well as the outdoor area. There's the patio at ground level, and then also the rooftop patio and the pedestrian connection to the store. Those are all things that weren't part of the original approval for the 3-level building. So at the Planning Commission, this request was at the Planning Commission at their last meeting, and the Planning Commission recommended that the council approve the request for all of the applications by a vote of 6-0. So I'll just put forward the items for discussion for you this evening. So there's the rezoning from R3 to R4, the number of units, which is a change of 33 units. And as part of the PUD, the city council can vote to have a limit on the number of units, even though the R4 zone would allow for significantly more units on this site. It would allow for almost 100 additional units at the maximum density. But the staff supports the council having a limit on as part of the PUD, so there would be a cap on the number of units. And also the landscape and screening for the surrounding uses. That's been a major topic of discussion through all of the meetings from the PUD concept review and the previous Hy-Vee development. As well as the building height, it's a change of 1 foot. It's actually a reduction in height. And then regarding the parking, that is a change in the code requirements, so that with a little bit less parking being required than what code allows. But the applicant is leaning heavily towards studio units and 1-bedroom units, so staff is comfortable with the reduction in parking. There's also a small setback variance on the south side to allow for additional green space on the north side. The R4 zone has a specific setback requirement for arterial roadways. Because of the arterial roadway there and the amount of right-of-way, the proposed building would actually be well over 100 feet away from the traveled lane for the exit ramp. So staff supports the reduction in that case. We have a requirement in the R4 zone for a 50-foot setback, and the reason for that would be to allow for additional landscaping in those sorts of situations. So if the building was going to be right up to the road, and there'd be additional green space. Because of the additional green space that's already there in the right-of-way, we're supportive of their applicant's request. So overall, staff recommends that the council approve the request, as well as the Planning Commission has recommended that the council approve the requests. I'll turn it over for any questions.
Staff? Questions of staff? Did you have a question? No. All right. Counselor Lehman, did you have any questions of staff?
Well, we've told the property twice now, 100 units, R3. It was R2. I think the Planning Commission was out of order to go against what it was zoned for. R3 is my compromise at 100 units, so I'm still there.
All right. Do you have a specific question of staff at all?
Do you know about
Okay. Counselor Whiting?
There was a lot of discussion about berms and landscaping, and we kind of went through a lot of that in the last time we talked about this proposal. Has there been significant changes, other than what you've spelled out already, to the landscaping and all that discussion that was held?
Mayor Mars, Councilor Whiting, there has not been any real significant changes. The applicant is proposing to provide what we believe is an adequate amount of landscaping. There were some neighboring residents that came to the Planning Commission meeting. I don't see them here this evening. And they had been working with the developer on finding ways to have the site screened. And have not heard any pushback from the developer regarding having additional height for the plantings. So I believe they're in support of that. They are here this evening if you have any questions on that. But the council can certainly request additional landscaping to be planted on the site, but before you on the slide, I've got the landscape plan right now.
Thank you.
Other questions of staff? If not, thank you, Kyle. Would the applicant like to come forward and make comment in regard to their final plan application? Please step forward and state your name and address for the record, and welcome.
Good evening, my name is Phil Hoy, 2960 320th Street West. I'm not the applicant, but we are the property owner. And frankly, I probably need one of these apartments. I'm here enough right now. So maybe I'll touch on a few items that were addressed. A question about the Freedom Townhomes. As Kyle pointed out, we did meet with the townhomes on site. We had our landscape technician there along with our Hy-Vee construction project manager and about 2 other folks. And we had, there's probably half a dozen of the townhome association members there. We walked around the site and talked about the plan of where to stick trees, where they want to see them. There's actually quite an encroachment. Actually really all along the whole property line, running north and south. But there are some beautiful lilacs that are across the property line. So you'd have to take those out in order to plant evergreens, and it doesn't sound like they want to do that, which is good. The trees will all remain as long as the townhome association wants the trees to remain. So our goal was just to work with them to figure out where those holes were and plant trees to plug those holes on their side of the property. And then this development will come in and provide additional landscaping to screen that north side of the project where the ponds are.
Councilor Whiting.
Just a comment, I did hear from some residents at the Freedom Townhomes, and they were very happy with you willing to work with them, and seemed like they had all their questions answered, and so I think you made those folks happy.
Yeah, and it doesn't always go that way. Sometimes you can never make people happy, but they were good to work with. I think there's one who wants a tree moved, so we'll go back and make that adjustment if they want to. I know they wanted some trees planted in the large easement area. They had some other concerns that we couldn't address, but all the ones that we can, we certainly will, and we'll continue to do so. With regards to the additional landscaping and the buffer area, really, regardless if this was a 100-unit development or a 133-unit development, or if this thing went up 5 more stories, that buffer area that's being created is really as large as it possibly can be, and as much landscaping that can feasibly be put in there is being put in there. Because of the slopes and because of the parking area, and there's underground parking here as well. But this plan actually provides for a larger buffer area and more landscaping between the parking area and the single-family residential than the original plan planned for. So in that manner, it's providing more buffer area, and the additional screening of the landscape island, I'll call it, and that middle section is also providing additional screening and buffer area that the original plan had not contemplated. So there's a lot of things about just the overall site plan itself. Before we start talking about the building and just the elevations of the building, the different elevations and the more interesting vertical components of this project versus the original construction. And then we start talking about materials. This project has better materials than the original project contemplated. So there's benefits site-wise, there's benefits from the building, and there's benefits from the overall product whether it's the granite countertops or the amenities, the rooftop amenities, the patio areas, the connections to the grocery store. So we see a lot of benefits as a neighbor to this project, besides the fact that we're interested party as sellers. But we think this is a very good project, and we'd ask for your support. It was me that was in front of you originally asking for the 100-unit project that obviously didn't come to fruition. But this is a real project that can happen. And so we just ask for your support on the additional 33 units from what was originally approved here at City Council.
Okay. Questions? I guess Phil, I have one, a couple maybe. Do you think you have more neighborhood support now than you did before because of whatever it is, more landscaping, more consideration on the building material, even in lieu of this density creep?
I guess what I would say was we had a lot of discussion with the neighbors back before there was, just when Hy-Vee's project was going through the process. When we had our neighborhood meeting, nobody wanted to talk about the Hy-Vee. They all wanted to talk about this. It was all about this. And so I think even back then it was, what's really going to happen? What can you do there? What am I going to be able to see? What's the buffer going to look like? Those are all questions that didn't have answers. So I think what's happened along the way is the uncertainty and ambiguity that existed has gone away. So I think that's helped. Again, as Kyle pointed out, I don't see them here this evening. So I think that is a testament to the fact that their questions have been answered. Really, at the end of the day, what I heard most was not really about the buffer area, but really more about Harvest Lane and the Harvest Lane connection going through, which really wasn't, it's a preconceived design, nothing that the developer drove or anybody really drove. It was more the street construction that was planned through the city's process years and years and years ago, that this Harvest Lane connection would eventually come through, and there's many emergency benefits to it and overall transit benefits to having it there. So that was really more the concern that we heard towards the end. It was the neighbors who were concerned that there was going to be more traffic through their neighborhood, not necessarily about the buffer, because again, I think there was more definition around what the buffer was going to be, so they could actually look at it and respond to it. So.
Other questions of the applicant? Councilor Luce?
I don't have so much questions. It's the height I've got no problem with. You know, you could go 2, 3, 4 feet over. That's no problem. The parking, you know, you made appropriate sizing, future sizing, if needed. The configuration from going from a straight building to an angled building, I have no problem with. The roof design, no problem. But we worked very hard at that first council meeting to get 100 units, and I think we did our job. More than that is asking too much.
Okay. I have a question for maybe not you, Phil, but parking, I think you have adequate parking, and I know you don't have 3 bedrooms listed here, but it's, if I was a single guy and I had a car, a motorcycle, and then a boat, I'm taking 3 spots. Is it obviously that's going to be allowed?
I will let Dennis Cornelius from Ancon Construction answer that. I don't think that they'd be too excited about people having a boat and a camper and a Mustang that they got to work on the weekends out in one of these parking spots. I'm not sure that's going to be something that the lease will allow for.
Just a simple question. It came up in a neighborhood where we had more 3-bedroom rentals where 3 college kids would rent, and then they'd each have a car, a motorcycle, and a boat or something, and then the parking just exploded because it met our code. But then you have a 3-bedroom and you're taking up 6 spots.
Well, you bring up a good point. And so initially when they designed this building, they had a number of 3-bedroom units when they designed it. And when they went back through and did some more market analysis and market research on what the true demand is for units in this area, which, by the way, as you well know and have heard, and tonight in some of the interest in some of the other projects, which, by the way, kudos to the city for some of the very neat things that are happening in your downtown. But there's obviously a need for this type of product, an apartment product in the community. There's a huge deficiency. And so getting back to when they went back and did their study, they realized that there's not a huge demand for 3-bedroom units. And maybe some of that is some of the other things that come along with having 3-bedroom units. So they went and converted those 3 bedrooms to 2 bedrooms and 1-bedroom units, which is why it's at 133.
Counselor Whiting?
You know, I do have some concerns about the parking. I'd hate to start a precedence where we're losing parking, and it looks like you have a plan here. I would like to see that initiated if this project goes through, so that the adequate parking is there all along. That way we don't have to get pushed on any other projects to go back on where our parking requirements are.
Any other questions of the applicant or their representative?
Dennis Cornelius might want to, for Mancon Construction, might want to get up and say a few words as well.
Please come forward and state your name, address for the record, and welcome.
Thank you. My name is Dennis Cornelius. I'm at 5565 Blaine Avenue, Inver Grove Heights. Just in response to some of the questions about landscaping and density of the building, we've had 2 meetings with the neighborhood. One was an informal meeting, and then we had the formal meeting with them. The biggest issue that we ran into initially was the landscaping between the 3 houses right against Harvest Lane. We addressed that through the larger berming, larger density of trees. And that's one of the reasons where we've looked at this proof of parking, to give them a much bigger green space to buffer the parking lot from the building. We're confident the parking is adequate as it's currently designed. Obviously, we have the proof of parking. If it's deemed necessary, it's not difficult to do. We could cut into the berm and use retaining walls to still maintain the density of the berm, but provide the parking if required. Open to any questions.
Other questions? If not, thank you. Proceed.
Do you want to take each of those components that? I think we've talked about most of those components.
Yeah, we have. You know, a foot on the height, is that obviously I think that is, I think we're getting a overall better building or construction material. The height is a foot.
I have no problem with height.
The landscaping seems like we're getting enhanced.
No problem with that.
Parking, we talked about. Parking's an ebb and flow thing. It's, you know, we're gonna see some 1 bedrooms and some. Counselor Lehman, you're back with us.
He's just flying around out in outer space, I guess, bits and pieces, you know how it goes.
Have you been to other council meetings, or is this your meeting? Well, welcome
No.
back. We're discussing the items for discussion, parking, building height, landscaping, obviously the number of units and the rezoning. I know we've heard about your number of units concept, but do you have any other concerns on landscaping, building height, or parking?
Well, I think they've done a good job on most of them. Is that they decide this have always had the expectation of R2. The recommendation from the developers R4. My compromise way back was R3, and here we are back to so my position is R3, 100 units. It's all support.
I think we got that.
Thank you. Mr. Thompson?
Mr. Mayor, there's 2 actions before you tonight, and I do recommend that you act on the ordinance, rezoning ordinance first before you act on the resolution, just so they fit together correctly.
Okay. Counselor Whiting?
I'll make a motion to adopt ordinance number 965, which rezones the property from R3 multiple family residential to R4 high density residential.
I have a motion and a second. Discussion. I have a question. If can we, in this 965 ordinance, can we, I'm a number specific person, rather than a range. Can we tie that to 133, Mr. Thompson?
Mr. Mayor, members of council, as Mr. Sabota said, through the PUD process, you can put a cap on that, so that would be a more appropriate amendment to make to the next act, the resolution, not to the rezoning ordinance.
Okay. Further discussion? Discussion? All in favor, say aye. Aye. Those opposed?
Aye.
Motion passes 3-2. Counselor Whiting?
I'll make a motion to adopt Resolution 7905, which approves the final plat of West Veerling Acres, 3rd Edition, a conditional use permit for overheight structure, and a planned unit development PUD amendment to allow the development of 133 unit apartment buildings and a building, and I will also add that with the appropriate, the extended parking, if that's appropriate.
Okay, motion on the table, and a second by Counselor Mokel.
I'll second it with a comment. I'm not as concerned about the parking. For me, because I think if you go back to the picture, I think the residents are more concerned with the berm.
It doesn't affect the berm, though.
In the landscaping plan, there.
It does.
It would,
Yeah, if you
retaining
look at
wall
the landscaping plan, it does.
It was gonna use a retaining wall, as I recall.
I would, but what I would offer is maybe that, I would think that the developer would add that additional parking if they perceive a problem as they're renting the units. Can we maybe get clarification from them on that?
All right, let's slow down here. So, Michael?
Mayor and council, one of the things staff's looking at right now is revisiting our parking ordinance, because both for commercial and apartments, we are one of the most overparked cities in the Twin Cities. So, I wish Mr. Loney was here tonight, because we had a conversation today that he said, well, you think engineering would like parking, we don't, because it creates tremendous stormwater issues. So if you visit, particularly these projects that are one bedrooms and efficiencies, they're way down in the parking counts. And I think Mr. Sabota mentioned, 1.5 per bedroom is kind of the industry standard nationwide. We're way out of whack on our numbers, and so we're looking at those right now and we'll be coming back for a change in the ordinance. I would ask that the developer show proof of parking, which is one of our requirements. It's in their best interest if they want to rent these units. If they see the demand, they can pave that. But at the neighborhood meeting, that kind of came up, and the neighbors really don't want that paved. They said, let's let it go, and if they need it, they can pave it, but let's just leave it alone.
Counselor
I'll offer, I appreciate the feedback and information, and knowing that the developer will add that if necessary. I think they'll need it. But I'll offer to amend my motion to not include the parking
extended
component.
parking?
Yeah.
That's acceptable to the second?
Correct.
All right. Further discussion? I just want to say I struggle with this on the creep on the units. But I do think that this area infill and what we're doing in the west end is important to the west end of our community, and it's exciting to see the growth. These apartments, if we all live in single-family homes, the apartments are in hot demand. Lots of articles, if you're an avid reader, about this. So that's kind of my comment on it, and I'm glad we have again, I know we had a cap on it before, but we have a cap on the number now. Mr. Lehman, or Councilor Lehman?
So under the final plat that we're moving on now, what would the maximum densities be?
Well, under the PUD, it's 133 units.
I think he's looking for 18.6.
18.6.
From
Well,
14.
we just voted against the R4, and the R3, it's zoned R2. We voted against R4. So what are we voting on now?
We're voting on the PUD, Mr. Thompson.
Mr. Mayor, members of council, Council Lehman, the vote on the rezoning passed on a 3-2 vote, so the rezoning to R4 did pass.
Rezoning takes 4 out of 5.
Ms. Mayor, no, that's not correct.
That is correct.
A rezoning from one residential district to another does not require a supermajority vote. A comprehensive plan change would require a supermajority vote, but not a rezoning from one residential district to another.
Okay.
Okay, so we disagree on state statute on this.
All right.
Okay, moving forward.
So we are on the packet item, Resolution 7905, and there's a motion on the table. We discussed some parking and unit specific at 133.
Okay.
And then do you have now discussion?
Nope, should be 100. I'll vote against it.
All right. Further discussion? Discussion, all in favor, say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Those opposed?
Sorry, I'm opposed.
Nope, I understand, Matt, thank you. Motion passes 3-2. Thank you very much. All right, moving ahead to 11A5, purchase agreement for Boo Ha Ha Properties, and Michael will present. Welcome back.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. This is the second piece of an acquisition. This would be later. This would occur sometime next year, after, I believe, April of 2018. And that's to allow the developer to get going on this project and so that they can move forward with the other project. And again, you'll be seeing a development agreement as part of this project.
Questions of staff? Once again, purchase agreement like we saw similar. Council Mokel?
I am going to make a motion to approve resolution number 7902 to acquire two parcels, 321 First Avenue West, PID numbers 2700100820 and 2700108030.
Second.
I have a motion, a second by Councilor Whiting. Discussion. My question for both these parcels, the total price is of $375, is that correct?
Correct, Mayor and Council.
Discussion. Councilmember Luce?
Well, if we're paying $375, we're paying a $25,000 premium on these properties, which I can't go along.
Compared to what?
Compared to what the county tax rolls call.
Okay, usually again in real estate,
Usually again in real estate, you don't tip your hand to the seller that you're gonna buy the property for redevelopment.
if I came to buy your house, Councilor Luce, and said, here's your property tax, I'm just gonna pay that amount, what would you say?
I'd have to look at it.
Okay. Usually the market value of your house for assessment and taxation basis is a little different from a purchase price of a transaction.
Commercial property is different than houses.
Further discussion? Counselor Lehman, did you have a discussion point on this?
Nope, we discussed earlier.
Okay, there's a motion on the table on a second. Counselor Mokel? Further discussion? Discussion, all in favor, say aye. Aye. Those opposed?
Aye.
Motion passes 3-2. Thank you.
Mayor, can I make a motion for a 5-minute recess?
I will second that.
All right, Matt? It's your favorite
Yes,
time
sir.
of the night? We're gonna take a short recess.
Okay.
We'll reconvene the City of Shakopee City Council meeting for the last day of spring, June 20th, 2017. We are back on at 11A6, property acquisition for non-payment of taxes. Michael will present. Welcome again.
Mayor and council, good evening. This is property that has been offered to the city via Scott County. We, by state statute and through the regulations, are offered property that for unpaid taxes. We haven't done that a lot, however, this is the particular property in discussion tonight. So this is a railway right-of-way, and our concern, and not that we want to be in the railway business, is that if this were to go to tax auction, there are people called tax trolls that would probably buy this and block railway access to these business. So it's not going to be very much money. We haven't been able to get the final answer, I believe, out of Scott County, but it's just the back taxes on it. Pardon me?
No back taxes.
There's no back taxes. So we'll just be acquiring this
Okay.
for basically to keep, if you can see from the picture here, it's the, this to work. Or maybe not. It's basically this rail line here and this rail line all the way to back to here. There's an odd little piece here. One of the rails is actually controlled by the auto auction because they bring in cars sometimes that way. But this will preserve basically the railway access out there.
Questions of staff, Councilor Whiting?
This is an actual spur currently, correct?
Yes, council member.
And who owns it?
Questions?
It's currently owned by the RV Dealership Limited Partnership, and it's gone back and forth over the years in tax, and this time they did not redeem it. And so our concern was if it would go to the county tax auction, somebody would buy it and theoretically be able to shut off access. So this is basically a move. We've talked to the county. It's a way for us to protect access. You can see on the photograph right here, this is actually where it crosses over the highway.
Yep.
That's the tracks. And the county was concerned that someone would actually interfere with the highway because that's their point of access there. So this will protect that rail access.
Questions of staff, Councilor Lehman?
I do have questions. One of the pictures included in our packet. Second question is, I didn't know anything about this until I got the packet late Friday. Seems to me a little better communication, I guess, in advance would be nice. Because I have no idea where these properties are located.
Okay. Yeah, just a heads up for staff, no map was included in this, and hard to identify where it was, but there wasn't a map in the packet here, but that's fine. Councilor Lewis?
Mayor, I apologize.
Yep.
We just got this from Scott County.
Purchases, are we gonna have to maintain it? I mean, is there some, I know we're covered under League of Minnesota Cities for liability, but where do we stand on maintenance?
We will work with the railway that uses this to deliver vehicles.
And I have another question.
Okay. Councilor Lehman?
Why would we not have the businesses that utilize these spurs take the opportunity to purchase them since they benefit from them?
I think that's part of the question. If some landowner purchased it, then they could control the access of the rail, which I think the whole object here is to put it in city hands so we can control, and maybe these businesses don't use rail today, but maybe in 10, 20 years something changes and they need access to rail, and then they have it. Councilor Luce?
Is there?
Oh, I'm sorry, Matt.
Is there a way I can see this map?
Yep, just a minute.
Stand by.
Councilor Luce?
What is our purpose other than keeping someone else from buying it? Are we going to, if someone needs it, are we going to rent it to them? Are we
It's
going to
in
sell
the
it to them?
shared drive.
What is our purpose
Effective.
other
Sure.
than keeping it from somebody else?
Councilor Whiting?
In my opinion, this is economic development.
I
With
understand
having
that, but I
rail
mean,
access.
what is the end game?
Yeah, I see that. Michael?
Mayor and council, I think the short-term goal is to get access to this. The long-term goal will be to work with the railway and the property owners. This is basically, we're buying a right-of-way that's been taxable, and we're gonna do is try and make sure that somebody else does not get access to this and keep it open and work with those property owners and find out who needs it and who doesn't need it. I think our concern is we just got the notice last week from Scott County, we've been tracking all sorts of properties. This one happened to come up, and they said, we're going to take this to auction. You have a decision, pass a resolution tonight, or it goes to auction. So, and again, I think it's critical, particularly in this quarter, to preserve that rail access.
Well, all right.
Can't you just take the camera and put it on the monitor?
More questions of staff? And we're trying to get that picture to you.
Can you explain where it might be?
It's a rail spur
Behind
that
the auto auction.
that starts over by Brambilla's, and it cuts in between those buildings and in between, like where Shakopee Valley Printing was, and the auto
Okay.
auction. It's the in between those. It isn't the one that runs along 101. It's in between,
Okay.
and it runs from. It comes up and curves by Brambilla's and ends up over by Anchor Glass.
Behind Air Gas. Okay, yep.
So it's
Got
in
it.
between Shakopee Valley Printing, the auto auction. It runs in between that industrial going east and west.
Yep, I know where that is. I know where that line is now.
Okay.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Welcome. Did you get a picture?
Yep.
All right. Counselor Whiting?
I'll make a motion to adopt a resolution to acquire 2 parcels to protect the rail spurs for the industrial park.
Second.
Okay. Further discussion?
Well, the resolution is 7904.
Okay,
parcels.
thank you for that, for the record. So you mentioned the resolution, which the
Mayor?
partial numbers are on there. Counselor Lehman?
Can we put a cap on this with, and then if it happens to go above that, it would come back to us?
The price is $5,000 for each, or $5,000 total?
Mr. Mayor, council members, there is only going to be filing fees with this. There is no back taxes on it. The county has waived the back taxes that are literally were like $120 a year for the taxes on that. So they had waived the forfeited or the delinquent taxes at this point. So it's only filing fees, to my understanding, in discussion with the county. So
That's $5,000 filing fee?
no, just the
Mayor and
recording
Council,
fees.
originally, we weren't sure what the taxes were, and that's what it showed in the tax rolls, but Darren's been able to work with the tax collector to have them waive the back taxes on this.
The memo wasn't clear. It just says it should be less than, and I'd like to just say, let's just put it there, not to
I'll
exceed
amend.
this.
The motion maker is going to make an amendment.
I'll amend up to $5,000.
Not to exceed.
Not to exceed $5,000.
And I'll second that.
Okay.
And then it's okay with the second? So amended, the resolution 7904, not to exceed $5,000. Further
Okay.
okay, further discussion? Discussion, all in favor, say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Motion carries. Thank you very much. Moving ahead then to 11B1 monthly financial review. Darren, welcome.
Thank you, Mayor, and council members. Give me 1 second here. Before you tonight is the May financial report. As you may recall, last month, typically we've been doing financial reports at the first meeting of the month, and I had requested to move it to the second meeting of the month just to give us a little better financial picture of where we're at for that month. It gives us an opportunity to get month-end journal entries done that occur right at the end of the month or a couple days thereafter. And sometimes with the council meetings within the first couple days of the month, it doesn't necessarily give us that opportunity to get the full picture. So this is as of May 31st, so the end of May, we're about 42% of the way through the year. Looking a little bit at the revenues here, we are comparing this May of this year to May of last year, and with our budget of this year, obviously a couple items to note. Our property taxes are obviously at 1%. We actually will be receiving our first half property taxes tomorrow via payment from the county. So that number will increase obviously for the June financials at this point. The special assessments, I've kind of mentioned those over the last couple of months. Those as well have, this is a negative amount at this point in time. When we get our tax settlement, when we record that settlement tomorrow, we'll get some of those delinquent garbage payments that we assess at the end of each year, and so that number now will be more in line with what where it should be. Another item to note is the licenses and permits. That is actually, year-to-date this year is down about 20% compared to last year, which last year was an outstanding year, and this year is still an outstanding year. We're still at 60% of what we had budgeted, but note that that's down 20% of what last year's actuals were, but you can notice here we're at that 60% level, which is well above that 42% target at this point in time, so all good on that front. Intergovernmental revenue, that is down a little bit, but it's very comparable to this same time last year. There's a few state payments that we get later in the year. In October, we get the police and fire state aid, so those are big chunks of money to there, about $585,000 or so. And then we get our second half municipal state aid maintenance money. I believe that's in July, I believe we get that. So that'll be another big payment that'll help bring that amount back in line with what the actual target is. And as far as that, the rest of the revenues are kind of within range at this point in time. From an expenditure standpoint.
On the revenues, I'm sorry,
Yep,
Darren.
yep,
Just,
absolutely.
nothing really to be concerned about. A couple down arrows. The biggest one is the taxes, which will come in tomorrow. Some of these other numbers are smaller in scale, but nothing really jumps out at you.
Right, absolutely. So the intergovernmental piece of that is, like I talked about, that it's not recurring equally amongst those 12 months. And we've talked about that before, is that the property taxes are a prime example, is that we get those twice a year. So we see, you know, we're way below, and then all of a sudden we're back up to 50%, and then we'll work ourselves down, and then at the end of the year we'll be back within our target.
Right. Thank you.
Looking at expenditures, expenditures are all within line except for there's one red arrow there that does fall in line with the finance department, so I gotta take credit for that one. That is due to the assessing contract that we have with Scott County for our assessing services. We pay that once a year on I think we got a 3-year contract that we signed last year with them, and that's $268,000. So for the finance budget, that's a big one-time.
On the finance, you said take credit for it, but really it's too many debits, I think, is what you meant to say.
Debits, credits, yeah, no. So that'll come back in line as the year progresses and such like that. That's the biggest one non-recurring expenditure within the finance department.
Councilor Lehman?
The only thing that jumps out is taxes, which we all know is first half, second half. Assessments, and, well, finance. Apparently you're spending too much money in your department, Darren.
Yes, we were just discussing that.
Well noted. Thank you, Ms. Councilor Lehman. The other...
Print some more.
We're working on that. The other item to note is the engineering department. That one actually has a green arrow. That's at 26%, and we just did hire 2 full-time engineers that came on board the 1st of May. So they had a little gap. There was a gap there on some savings on personnel expenses on that end of it. But other than that, all the other expenditures within the general fund are all within target. It's all looking really good. We're at 37%, whereas that our target at this point in time is about 42%. So all good points at this point in time. So. Any questions on the expenditure side? Otherwise, I'll move on to the
On the
community
expenses
center.
side, otherwise we'll move forward. Just keep them down. Thank you.
Okay. Looking at the community center and ice arena comparison, we started this a few months ago. We're getting more and more data each month. Obviously, we don't have a year of operation yet in place, but we're plugging away at it here a little bit. Ice arena revenues are about $273,000 more than they were, or at $273,000, I'm sorry, through May 31st, compared to $169,000 last year. Obviously, with a second sheet of ice in there, we got more rental sales availability. And then, obviously, then through the summertime, our ice sales will probably decline a little bit as the demand isn't quite as high as it is during our prime months in the winter and such like that. So, from an expenditure standpoint, they should be pretty consistent. With the warmer weather, it probably takes a little bit more energy to keep the facility cool. So we probably do see probably a pretty consistent amount of expenditures throughout the 12 months. It really isn't probably dependent upon ICE sales or non-sales at that point. So, but they are right on pace. They were, I think I calculated them right at about 41% of the year's budget. So if things stay status quo, it's hard to say exactly when we get into the full operations this fall now, in early winter, how that'll kind of relate out. But from this point on here, it looks like we're on target. So looking at the community center revenues, they've increased about $146,000 or 128% from this same time last year. Membership sales are actually up. Sales to date are $221,000 versus about $88,000 or $89,000 last year. So that's a big number there. So that accounts for a lot of your revenue increase at this point. Personnel expenditures are up about 18%, and that's due to an expanded community center. We hired some additional staff to accompany our increased size of the facility and programming needs and customer service needs. Operational expenses are up about 25%. We did make our first, the workout facility area with the weight equipment and exercise equipment has been open now, and that new equipment came in. It was operational in the first part of May, I believe, and so we made our first lease payments on that equipment. So some of that equipment we're leasing as basically a rent, some of the elliptical machines, treadmills, et cetera, those types of equipment that wears out.
Is that a one-time payment per year, or is
That's we pay it per month.
Oh,
so
you do?
it's a monthly payment over, I think it was a 4-year lease or 5-year lease. I can't remember what that was.
So there'll be a little more streamlined going forward as if it's a just general month expense, right?
Right, absolutely, absolutely. Then I think the weight equipment, that's a capital lease, so at the end of that lease, we'll actually own that equipment and won't have a need to purchase that again, So other than that, that's kind of where the expenditures for the community center and ice arena and revenues are at. If you got any further questions on that?
Great to see the membership sales up significantly, obviously doing what we wanted to do and even more hopefully continues, so that's good. And this is good baseline data as we get into even next year to look and see where we're at.
That's really where it's going to be beneficial, I think, is when, a year from now we can kind of take a look and see where, and we don't have the pool open quite yet either,
Right,
so
that was my
there's
comment,
another
yeah.
piece of
Big
the
expense
piece
there,
of
and
the pie
hopefully
that'll-
a revenue generator though, but I do understand the expense part of it.
Absolutely.
Counselor Whiting?
No, I just wanted to mention that the pool's not open, so I'm looking forward to seeing those numbers, after that.
Yep, very good point.
Counselor Lehman, did you have any questions on this?
Nope, already asked them.
Counselor Lewis? No, anything else, Darren?
Nope, that's all I have.
Thank you very much for this overview, I appreciate it. Moving ahead to 11B2, updated liaison list. Because of a vacancy, I've looked at the liaison list and appointed Counselor Whiting to the chamber to go along with his Main Street, kind of ties together, and Counselor Mokel to the Shakopee Public Utilities. And I apologize, there is a miss on the non-liaison positions down at the bottom on the back of page 1, EDA Vice President of Kathy. But those are the recommendations. Counselor Whiting?
Refresh my memory, do we still have a railroad commission?
It was on there as an ad hoc, and I talked with Mr. Reynolds about it, and it is here listed. Railroad Committee has not met in over a year. They're moving to ad hoc. I had left it on there. There was some discussion that nothing's happening right now. Certainly if it got more discussions of some purpose came up, we can take a look at it then. Mr. Reynolds?
Mr. Mayor, since we've had that discussion, we've actually had some movement in that area. Councilor Lehman and I have been in discussions in regards to meeting internally and then having a meeting with the railroad in July.
Okay.
So the railroad is interested in sitting down and talking with us, and then so we're essentially going to hear what they have to say and once we figure out what that is, we'll report back to the
And
council.
then out of that meeting might generate a committee. We will see.
I
Not sure what they want.
We're not sure. So,
Counselor Whiting?
If I can comment, it seemed obvious to me with the way they've been driving through town full horn all the way through town the past couple nights, that something's moving in that direction. I mean, they did not stop all the way through town at 9:55 PM, again at 10:20. I don't know if there's a complaint line, but I'd like to find out.
Okay. Well, maybe we can know more out of that
Yeah.
meeting. Okay. Make a motion? Counselor Whiting?
Just a comment, it's going to be very difficult for me to make these chamber board meetings, but I will give it my best shot.
All right, I appreciate that.
But I'll make a motion to approve the updated liaison list.
Excellent. Counselor Mokel, a second?
Correct.
Further discussion? Discussion. All in favor, say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. All right. 11B3, capital bonding request. Darren, welcome.
And before Mr. Nelson addresses, I just kind of wanted to talk about a little bit about what you see in front of you. When I first came here, I was intrigued by the fact that we send a lot of money to the state, but in the past we apparently have never asked for some of that back. And I think that there are some great opportunities. Frankly, many other communities in the state ask for money from the state for community centers, for ice arenas, for fire stations, for public safety, sometimes for arts, including statues of horses and such things. So I basically told staff, well, guess what? We're going to have our hand out too. And we looked at the list of projects that we had on the horizon, and the fire station, wherever that may ultimately be, certainly is one of those things that we want to at least get our name on the list. Now, understand that this is a bonding year for the budget, and very rarely will you ever get any money from your first time at the table. So I wanted to put the marker out there and basically said, we are here, and we're going to continue to ask for this every year. And so that's what you see here. It is our first foray into asking the state to support the local community, which, by the way, as we all know, the city of Shakopee is certainly the tax generator for the the South Metro. So why in the world wouldn't we want to try to get some of that money back? With that being said, Mr. Nelson.
Mr. Nelson.
Thank you, Mayor, council members. With that being said, I don't have anything that would present more than what Mr. Reynolds presented to you there. So this is basically just an application. It's that we need a resolution of support from the council to get on the state's bonding request list at this point in time. So this is just the application point in time.
Questions of staff, Counselor Whiting?
More of a comment, I guess, or commentary, but I think with the partnerships with the Shakopee Medwakaton community on this project, the location close to Prior Lake and Savage, and I know the SMSC used to have a lot of lobbyists down in St. Paul. Hopefully they can utilize some of that for a project like this, but that partnership, I think, will help the project along, I'm hoping.
And Mr. Mayor, Council Member Whiting, I should note that this application, so that was my initial angle going into this, is that it was going to be a joint partnership. In talking with the state on Friday morning, late last week, I talked with them Wednesday, Thursday, and then Friday morning they came back with an official answer is that with general obligation bonds through the state, that becomes a state basically building, or it would be basically deeded to the city, but it has to be owned by the city. It couldn't have a joint partnership with a non-state of Minnesota government entity on that end of it.
So would they be involved in this or not yet?
They, even from a leasing standpoint, they were very sketchy on that and said that, we'd like it to be just a City of Shakopee application. So at this point, we're just keeping our options open to see what's in place. We don't necessarily have an agreement with the
A little
with
cleaner
the
this
SMSC
way.
either at this point,
Cleaner
so.
this way. Counselor Loose?
So is that gonna preclude us from joining forces in the future when it's built? I mean, are they going to?
Mr. Reynolds?
I think the answer is we do not know at this point. Again, the purpose of this is to kind of put our marker on the table that, you know, that we're looking for this in the future. I think there are a lot of things that we'll have to work out, Counselor Luce, that certainly being one of them.
I would hope staff can look into that and maybe get back to us, because if that's gonna preclude us from partnering, we need to know that. I don't mean we need to know it now, I'm just
Yes,
saying.
I absolutely, I agree with that.
Down the line. Okay, Counselor Lehman, did you have a comment, question?
Yeah, I gotta plug in here. I'm running out of juice.
All right.
Well, I think that at some point, I think we're ahead of ourselves, and I think the resolution is too all-encompassing. It's one thing to ask for the grant, but it's another thing to put all these other things into the resolution. We've never had a discussion about the operational side of this facility, or the partnership. So I would be okay with going ahead with just a grant portion, because I think that's gonna have a lot of decision information for me in the overall concept. But what really gets me is we basically are giving $3 million away, taxpayer money, to developers, and now we're turning around asking taxpayers for $3 million. So, crazy world.
I actually think this is a good idea, to go to the state and ask for some bonding money, and you're correct, Mr. Reynolds, you don't always get it on the first try. This is a upcoming budding need of Shakopee that's been in our community and been discussed, and if we could get a little help from the state, that would be great. Yes, there's some, you know, issues in regard if we're gonna have a partnership or not, but I will say that whether we have a partnership or not, the need is not going away and only expanding. So I give a little tip of my hat to the effort of staff to put this together, to put it on the radar at the state level. Counselor Luce?
I guess one other thing I'd like staff to look into would be if we partner with Prior Lake and Savage, which was mentioned, would that give us a little better avenue? Because they're actually gonna be giving the 3 cities in, which would make it more feasible for the state.
Counselor?
Just a comment from my, you know, I know the fire department has mutual aid agreements with all these cities, so whether or not it's part of, you know, Savage, Prior Lake, Shakopee, it'll be Shakopee, but it will still be responding to those other cities with a mutual aid agreement as needed. And the
And we'll
tax numbers.
still be going to the
are-
Midwakaton, even if they don't, can't be part of it.
But the ISO ratings on people's insurances will also be better off because they have fire service within a certain amount of diameter, and they're not looking at city borders at that point in time. So this, even if we're paying tax dollars from the state, it's still a savings to, in the insurance side, to the businesses and homeowners.
Counselor
And-
Luce?
Oh,
Mr. Reynolds?
I was just gonna say to Counselor Lehman's point, that money's going somewhere. And my point is, if it's gonna go somewhere, why in the world shouldn't it come to Shakopee?
Right. Invalid point. Counselor Luce?
This year in the tax bill, it's going back to the taxpayers.
Counselor Luce?
As Councilor Whiting mentioned, that ISO number for insurance ratings, is there any possibility of us getting any kind of number on that so we would know
Yeah,
where our investment would be covering? You know, what our investment's gonna drop the citizens' insurances by?
I can get you the current ISO numbers for all of the areas. I can't really, I can't give you an estimate until we actually have the ratings be conducted. But I can show you what it is in different parts of the city based upon the locations of fire stations.
Well, right here, they say it's covering how many $1 billion worth of property. I mean, we should be able to come up with something
Yes, sir.
definitive on that.
It will have an impact on people's
Right.
insurance.
I just kind of would like a number so we can throw that out to the public to say, here, this is
And I'll
what.
bet you that rating out in that area is a little higher than
Yeah, it is.
Where you live or I live, that's pretty close.
But there's a lot of different factors that go into the ISO rating.
That's correct.
So.
All right,
I
Counselor
will-
Lehman?
I would like to add, I'd like to ask any citizen in Shakopee to call their insurance company and ask them that specific question, because I took the liberty to do that. And there will be no adjustment. Haven't been one in Shakopee on my house, at least. They rate it so widely that it's basically for, do you have fire protection in your city or not? Do you get it from the outside, and do you have hydrant service or not? That's really what they look at. They don't look at where the buildings are located, per se.
Depends on companies.
Council Mokel?
I'll make a motion to approve Resolution 7899 as requested.
I have a motion, and Counselor Whiting?
Second.
Second. Further discussion? Discussion? Discussion. All in favor, say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Okay, motion passes 5-0. Thank you. Moving ahead to liaison and administration. Counselor Lehman, liaison report.
The school board meeting, obviously you already know. I'll be very brief. Superintendent Thompson has resigned. That was the extent of that meeting because it was a special meeting.
Anything else?
No, sir.
Thank you very much. I can start here. On June 16th, I met with the Census Bureau people that are starting to gear up for the 2020 census, and looking just to inform our city and get some people involved. On 6/14, I met with staff, attended Bruce Loney's retirement party. On 6/17, big fun day here in Shakopee put on by our Park and Recs department, and was in the dunk tank, so that was fun. Today I attended a City Chamber of Commerce Leadership Committee. Also met with representatives of Hy-Vee. Get ready to become a helpful smile. Early stages of planning their employment. They're looking at up to 800 employees. So that was great. And then after that meeting, I did take a tour of our community center. So that's my liaison report. Counselor Whiting?
Other than getting a chance to stop by and saying thanks to Bruce Loney, I have nothing to report.
Counselor Mokel?
I also stopped by to say thank you to Bruce Loney, and I did not have any liaisons this week.
Thank you. Mr. Reynolds?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I think, as council knows, during the last meeting, I was in Washington, D.C. for the Transportation Alliance, lobbying for more transportation dollars for Minnesota in general, as well as talking with our local representatives in regards to some of our needs here in Shakopee. I also used the opportunity to reconnect with some old acquaintances and to specifically lobby for on behalf of a major corporation here in town, and some of the help that they might need with the federal government as well, and we're still working on that particular issue. I must say that Washington, D.C. has changed a lot since I was there for almost 8 years. And it was really hard to have focus, get anybody's focus at that particular week. That was the week when James Comey was testifying in front of Congress, and all of Washington was all focused upon that. You know, 98% of the United States might not have really cared that much, but I can assure you that Washington did. Last week, both Assistant City Administrator Burkett and I went to the League of Minnesota Cities conference on Thursday and Friday. We left a little bit early from Mr. Loney's reception to then drive down to Rochester. Rochester's an interesting city, and we specifically noted some of the things that they're doing in their downtown area. And I think that we'll try to get a hold of Elliot with the chamber at Main Street, and both Mr. Burkett, myself, and Mr. Kursky go down and take a look at some of the things that, frankly, we might steal for the city at some point, or at least get the discussion started.
They have
I don't think
received-
we're going to get Mayo.
They have received a lot of state funding.
They have received a lot of state funding, and they have a special taxing district for hospitals as well. This is a real busy time overall for the city staff and for the city in general. You know, obviously our construction season is very limited, so we're trying to push a lot in there. I can tell you both City Hall and the community center are moving forward. You know, and I will say, Mr. Mayor, you had mentioned that you were just in the community center today. And I understand that that project moving forward, you know, may have caused a divide in this community, but if you have not been in that world-class facility and you have not seen which will be, I have no doubt, the #1 facility in the state, then with that pool and the indoor playground and everything that's offered there, I cannot imagine. And you know, you come in, you work out, you put your kid in daycare for a couple hours, and they get to have fun as well. I cannot imagine that those particular numbers that we've seen in regards to the operations, our revenues are going to go up. I'm convinced of it. You know, I've spent so much time when I'm over there looking around, I'm looking for the small things, you know, like, oh, that's not right and this has to be done differently. And the reality is that was the first time I actually took a step back and realized it was a forest and not just a couple of trees. Fantastic facility. I can't say enough about it. And it'll be something that, you know, frankly, that we're going to be known for in the future. Just absolutely amazing. And Jamie Polly has done a hell of a job in marshaling that project through, and she needs to get a lot of credit for that. Outstanding job on her part. And that's all I have. Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much. And you're correct about the community center. And the things that we're doing that I'm hearing among my peers, the city hall, the downtown, these redevelopment opportunities are certainly at the community center. What I'm hearing are a little bit of separation of our community is leading the way versus some other. I hear from other mayors. What are you guys thinking about doing? What are you trying to do? Wow, and that's kind of the feel I get here from that. So, Councilor Luce.
Well, just one added comment. We will be the premier facility till the next one's built.
All right. Thank you. Moving ahead to other business. Councilor Lehman.
Wait a minute, you jumped one, didn't you?
2 items.
I apologize. Before we get to that, I just want to make a note that 12B, the city bill list, which does not need our approval or a vote. It's here for our perusal. Otherwise, we would move to other business. Councilmember Lehman.
2 items, Mayor. One is, let's not forget about the river crossing capacity that's needed into our future. That's something that we should all be looking at and lobbying for whenever opportunities arise. And the second would be a thank you to our administrative staff and our IT staff for making this meeting possible for me.
And it's great that technology has advanced long enough, far enough along for you to join us tonight, and I applaud that.
It's also great that the law changed to allow it.
And the law changed allowed that. Councilor Lehman, I will mention that I was at a Chamber of Commerce leadership meeting with Senator Pratt, and the river capacity crossings was brought up and discussed, and you know, the new river crossing at 41 was talked about and how important it is. So, you know, whether, you know, it's not anything that's going to get done today or tomorrow, but it's certainly on the minds of at least the people in St. Paul. So I thought of you when he brought it up and spoke to it.
It's on the minds of those in Washington also.
Wow, that's good. All right. Other business, Councilor Lewis?
Well, I'll let everybody else go because I've got a couple of them. So.
Oh, go ahead.
I did put a request in to Mr. Reynolds to resume my monthly meetings over a week ago. I haven't heard back, so I'd like to get those rescheduled as soon as possible. I've got every Tuesday and Thursday open for him. So, and I've received a number of complaints on codes, people getting violation tickets and stuff like that, and others that want to have something done with their neighbor's property. They've called me because they don't want to, they feel they're going to be inspected themselves and don't want to deal with it. And so
Well,
I've got a list
you
of.
can call and be anonymous on the.
They, caller ID, they don't want any part of it, so.
There's multiple ways that people can contact our staff to take care of code issues.
Yep.
They can send anonymous letters to the police department. They can call. So there are multiple,
There's the website, isn't there?
and there's also a website where you can do that as well.
All right.
Well, I've got a list of 10 that they wanted me to turn in, so either you want them or you don't.
All right.
That and, let's see, the monthly meetings. And I would like to do a Freedom of Information Act on the land survey that was done at Clarney Hills, and the city paid for it, because I'd like to see what the surveyor said. And I'd also like to do a Freedom of Information Act on Mr. Reynolds' emails between the rest of council. Mine have been out there. I think we need to take a look at everybody else's. So, see that the information's supposed to be going both ways. I want to make sure it is, so that's mine.
Very good. Other business? Other business? Counselor Mokel?
I'll make a motion to adjourn to Wednesday, July 5th, 2017 at 7 p.m.
Okay, I have a
Second.
motion. What was it, second? All
Second.
right. Further discussion, I guess tomorrow, first day of summer, so enjoy that. Remember, everybody, the SDA International Festival?
Yeah, International Festival Friday, starting at 5 p.m. Come on down to Huber Park.
And we will meet on Wednesday, July 5th. So happy 4th of July to everybody. Further discussion? All in favor, say aye. Aye. Those opposed, motion carries. We are adjourned. Thanks, Matt.